Okay, you are live.
Thank you very much. All right, good evening, everyone, and anyone who's joining tonight. It's Thursday, December 3rd.
Bueller.
For the
Anybody out
7
there?
p.m. Zoom meeting for the City of Annapolis Planning Commission. I'm Ben Sale, the chairman. We also have with us some fellow commissioners, which we will about to hear from when we call roll. I will now call this meeting to order. And we can go ahead, Ms. Hook, and go ahead and get the roll call done.
Mr. Sale,
Here.
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Mr. Klein,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Imes,
Here.
All right, looks like we have the full contingent of the 5 of us that are members. Thank you very much. Then we can proceed. We've got the members here for staff. We should have Mr. Beard, and obviously Ms. Hook, Joelle Braithwaite, Dr. Sally Nash, Kevin Scott, Tom Smith, Brian Adams, and Matt Waters. Are they also on? I'm gonna make sure here. Matt Waters is here and Brian, awesome. And they will be respectively, let me get these titles out for everyone. Brian Adams is the urban forester, and also Matt Waters is stormwater management engineer. Both of those people work for the city. We will now move on to the approval of minutes, and I will display the minutes from our last meeting of November 19th, 2020. And we had some amendments to those from Diane Butler, and I will show her amended version, which will have some corrections in red. There we go. Is everyone, can I get a check from that, Bob? Can you see that?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to make sure somebody saw it. And I received no recommendations for change from anyone else. So we'll go down to where there's the changes down in the text.
And Ben, I just want to point out that, you know, where there's a chart of public comment, I wasn't indicating that the testimony or the letter or email from Patricia, I don't know how to say her last name, Meinhold, should be, the content displayed. I just wanted to make sure it just went in the right box, because before it looks like it's in the box that says in favor instead of commented on. So I would just put for all of our sake, what she actually said, which was comment about the trees. So she commented on, she didn't write a email like most of those other emails that were in favor. So in other words, you can take out that little section right there that it says what she actually put in her letter.
Totally got it. That was a good catch as well. So basically, Diane's changes are really simple, more of administrative than anything, catching the correct vibe of what people have commented on and what they were saying, as well as what she was saying earlier up in the text right around here. I have no issue with it. Anyone else? Comments on the changes?
I move that we accept as amended.
I'll second.
All those in favor, we have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes as amended by Ms. Butler. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. We may need a comma in there, right around there, but that's it. Thank you very much, Ms. Butler, for those inputs. I'll stop the share on that item. Moving back to our agenda for new business. just wanted to bring up a quick item here for everyone. I don't know if you saw there was an email from Hillary Raftovich from the mayor's office with regards to something that I wanted to bring to the attention of everyone here, and it's called the Annapolis Greenway. And there's an Annapolis Greenway map input tool. You should have all received a email about that. And it gives the full instructions on how you can actually make input to that for the city of Annapolis to make your input. And I think it's quite a good item. So I'm just going to bring it up here real quick for everyone, and give me a second, and we'll put that up on the screen. Okay, can you see this? It's the Annapolis Greenway map.
No.
I don't see it yet.
Okay, let's stop share. Let's do that again. Share screen. Okay, this is filled out by Hillary Raftovich from the mayor's office, and it's how to submit areas for potential inclusion in the Annapolis Greenway map. This comes from the Annapolis Conservancy Board, which is welcoming your input to developing the Greenway map for the city. And I kind of think it goes along with what the Planning Commission does. So that's why I wanted to bring it up here for just a quick minute to point your attention to it. The emails from Hillary Raftovich. If you haven't gotten it, go ahead and poll her for that information. I believe I saw all of you on that. If I did not, and I'm wrong, please correct me. But the Greenway corridors, you can actually go into a tool that they have and make your input for how you want to see it for city. This also should go for the public as well. It's should be on the Annapolis webpage somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where at the moment, but the mayor's office is a great point of contact for anyone out there who wants to make some input to that, especially for neighborhood associations that may have something that they want to add down here, especially with these items down here. We'll go ahead and.
Ben, she sent that to the chair. Well, Joanna sent that to Hillary to send to the chairs to distribute as you are currently doing. So thank you. And it's a tool the Annapolis Conservancy Board is working on to identify these locations, and it will ultimately be incorporated into our comprehensive plan.
And I'd like to thank Planning and Zoning and the Annapolis Conservancy Board for working on this. I think Eric Lushinsky was very involved. I haven't tried to add any data to it yet, but I think it's going to be great and go a long way to accomplish some of the goals that we have. So thank you so much.
Thanks. And it's pretty easy. It's pretty intuitive, but if you have any issues, just reach out to me or Eric or Joanna or anyone, and we'll help you.
Perfect.
And there is a link. You'll see that here. And Sally, do you happen to know where that link would be on our city webpage yet, or where the best place to search for that? Are we going to put it on there?
Well, I think Joanna was hoping to first get input from boards and commissions and kind of see how that went, sort of a soft opening to kind of test drive it, if you were. Okay. So it's not on the website.
That makes sense to get so we can make it better before it goes more public, and then everybody else makes it. But a great thing coming our way for everyone, even the public out there listening right now. So glad to see that. Go ahead.
Ben, just to clarify, Sally, you said that just went to the chairs. So if it just went to the chairs, Ben, you might want to forward it to the team.
Got it. I got that. Thank you very much. I caught that. But
we're always thinking of work for you to do, Ben.
Hey,
and you
know what? No
very
problem.
grateful because you won't have any coal at Christmas.
All right, so there that is. We'll forward it to the rest of you, but the Annapolis Greenways map for coming from the Annapolis Conservancy Board input stuff to that map for the city of Annapolis. We'll go ahead and get that. I'll stop sharing that and we'll move right along. That was the new business item that I had. Does anyone else have any new business that they would like to put out there? And also the Maryland Planning and Commission, MPCA, for us planners out there, is going to be voting, I believe it's December 11th, December 10th, on some changing of some bylaws. So you'll see that email on your account as well. And for the last part of new business, we will have our next meeting on December 17th. And we already have a rough agenda for that, which may change based on what happens tonight. And on December 17th, we will be including more easily members of the public to testify as normal. We have a bit of that tonight, which is a little bit of ahead of the game. We were promised from planning and zoning last meeting, which is, I think, a good thing. We weren't expecting to have public comment via the Zoom until December 17th, but we're actually going to get a little bit of that tonight. So very good, very happy about that, even though it's in front of when we thought it was going to be. And then on that agenda, you can expect to see the other developments in West Annapolis that is coming up. All right, that's all I have for new business. Anyone else have anything they want to add, comments before we proceed into the lengthy deliberations this evening? Wonderful. Okay, we'll move right on along to item F, the public hearings and the major site design plan review application by 101 Annapolis MRE LLC and 103 Annapolis MRE LLC property owners for the redevelopment of the subject property with a new 8,101 foot gross square foot, 2-story mixed use building containing commercial as well as residential units. We already broached this subject and heard the applicant's testimony last 2 weeks ago in our meeting, and we also had some public comment. We got, I believe it's 21 additional public comments since then, and a lot of interest in the property over the last 2 weeks. This is the first time we've really had some very good input coming back, or at least a lot of input coming back from the community. I'm excited to see that, or excited in more ways than one. So we'll go through those. The way we're going to handle that this evening is we're going to play it like we always have, where we're still in the public hearing. So we're continuing it from last time, and we were going to display the public comments that we have, and then we will roll into what the developer might want to add on as comments back, as well maybe changes since the last meeting. Do any of the commissioners feel that we maybe want to hear the developer with any changes they might have to their application first before we go over these new comments? Or would you rather hear the comments from the public first put out there? Any comments from the commissioners?
I don't have a preference.
Okay. All righty.
Yeah, I think it would be, I think it would be somewhat sort of appropriate if we heard the public comments first and then give the, see how the applicant responds.
Okay.
Okay.
And as commissioners, we can respond at any point we need to, of course, or hold it to the end for efficiency. But we have, first, we'll go over the, we just went over in the minutes, the comments from the last one, and I want to bring those up real quick again. Not that. Sorry, I'm managing files and talking to myself at the same time, trying to work with you all. And hopefully you see this here. We'll go over again. We had, from last meeting, we had Frederick Depew in favor. Ms. Meinhold commented, and then Mr. Rosso, Sandell, Nolan, Brissell, McFall, and then McFall on the bottom commented on. Most of those obviously were in favor, as you can see. And now we will move on to this week's. Everybody give me about a 30-second mute here while I open some of these up. I had some, I get these going. And we'll go through the public's comments, and then I'll show you at the end, there is an arborist report from Bartlett Tree Experts, as well as a memo for the tree condition, Mr. Brian Adams. So we'll go with the Annapolis Environmental Commission contacted us over the break and wanted to actually testify tonight. They have also sent in a text document. I will show their text document, but we would rather have them do their voice testimony. So Ms. Kate Bohannon or Ms. Bevan Buckheister, who are the vice chair and the chair respectively of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. Can I get a voice check to see that both of you are on right now?
Hi, this is I'm the chair. On.
Is
Can you
this,
hear me?
is that Bevan?
Bevan, correct.
Okay,
I don't think Ms. Bohannon's on tonight.
okay. Let me bring up your public comment there. It's not, well, you can go ahead and testify, and while you're testifying, you
Okay.
have 3 minutes, which is normally what we give people, plus or minus a few, depending on what states.
Okay. I'm
And
sorry.
hold on, and that's how we normally do it, plus
Right.
or minus, a few seconds or whatever you need, and to get your point across. And I'll also bring up your PDF document while you're talking for everybody to look at. Is that going to work for you, bringing up your PDF document as well, or would you rather wait?
Or I'm just reading it from my, I'm looking at this on my phone, so it's very tiny, and I'm just looking at my computer, so I've got it. But I will say that the online form that I submitted, the box said you had 30 minutes to testify, which I thought was excessive time, and I would not use that all, but I do.
Well, go ahead and we'll get,
Yeah.
get the
Maybe
point across. And
Form for the next time, but happy to be your first Zoom public testimony guinea pigs.
Thank you.
So I'm Bevan, and I'm the chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight about this development at 101, 103 Annapolis Street. On the whole, it looks good. I mean, there's some good environmental features, pervious pavers, but what we were concerned about was the removal of these two very, very large mature oak trees and the replacement with small ornamental cherry trees. We also wanted to request that this hearing be continued because although the developers had a arborist report, the city did not submit an arborist report, and that was not on the public record when we reviewed it. And also the sign posting of this notice of hearing was not posted on Sunday when I was out there. And the residents I spoke to didn't have a chance to consider the plan and didn't realize the trees were being removed. That's something that we might want to fix in our notice requirements. Like whenever a specimen tree is being removed. I know that's not a requirement now, but the public hates it when trees come down and then they go, we didn't even know this was happening, but there was a notice sign out there. But my point tonight is that if we can't extend the hearing so we can actually look at the city's arborist report, then we're going to urge you just to retain the existing oak trees because we think this has a negative impact on the character of the community. And it's really not supportive of the city's longstanding tree canopy goal. We have a goal and we are not meeting that. And in fact, our tree canopy is decreasing on an annual basis. So we really want to see those trees, saved. And we think they can be saved. I'm not an arborist, but I was out there with other people that are qualified and they didn't see signs that they needed down. But if the city does believe the trees are not healthy and they need to come down and they won't survive the construction, then the city code does require that replacement trees reflect the density and species of those trees that are removed for development. So that means you have to replace that. It says will reflect. It doesn't say, may reflect. So that is a requirement. So you have to replant with the same species. So that means an oak tree or 2 oak trees. So, and I really wanted to make the point that these oak trees are perfectly situated on this site because they're moved back away from the power and the phone lines. So they're, very, very tall trees, really big canopy. And to get that kind of a tree, a replacement tree, you're going to need to put it in the same site. You can't move it under the wires. It won't be able to grow to full maturation and provide that replacement canopy. I mean, these trees are about 80 years old, I believe, 42 inches around and things like that. So, so we are asking that the city keep these trees, and we're also concerned that the symmetry of the street be preserved because all the other trees on that whole side of the street are moved back, and as are the buildings set back, and they're allowed to grow and be really big, tall trees. And if you allow this building to take out the trees, then the next one's going to take them out, and the next one, and the next one, and you're just going to have, small, like the cherry trees that were proposed here, and those aren't large canopy trees, and that is the character of the neighborhood, and that is the symmetry of the street and the symmetry of these two properties that are together. And the city definitely has authority to do that in section 14, where it says the city has authority to plant, remove, maintain, protect trees on or adjacent to all public areas to ensure safety or preserve symmetry and beauty of the grounds. So we do think that, looking at the site plan as a whole, there are some compromises that can be made. There's the plan for a large parking lot in the back. Maybe some of that can be, the building can be moved back a couple feet. It's already, I think, 16 feet back from the sidewalk. Maybe it could be moved back a couple feet if there's a problem with the on-site parking requirements and meeting that. Then maybe some of those can be waived. I would like to see developers reach for a waiver of that before they just cut down the trees, And I also wanted to mention that our city is focused on climate change, and urban trees help offset climate change. They capture atmospheric carbon dioxide, reduce energy use by buildings, reduce carbon emissions from power plants, and they store a lot of carbon. So they do offer a lot of environmental benefits, and especially these big older trees. And they also capture more stormwater than small ornamental trees. So we do urge you to save the trees if at all possible. And if not possible, then to save the planting situation for the trees that currently exists. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Buckeister. Ms. Chairman, I should say, of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. And we are going to keep you online here because the commissioners obviously may want to ask you questions right now and see what they have to say. Any commissioners would like to ask some questions of Ms. Buckeister?
I have a quick question. Did you not get to review the reports on either the landscaping as well as the arbor report from Bartlett tree experts during regular AEC meetings?
No, we didn't.
Okay,
And
I was just curious how, because normally your comments would be much earlier, so I was wondering what happened there. Okay.
yeah, no, we didn't. And for whatever reason, this has slipped through the cracks. I'm not sure why, but I could talk to you about improving the development process in the city of Annapolis, and that's a whole nother discussion. But for whatever reason, it didn't. So
Okay, I was just curious.
yeah.
Of course, I'm muted. The Bartlett tree analysis, who paid for that? Who ordered that one?
That's a report that we had completed.
Was that Mr. Hyatt talking?
That was me, EJ, the applicant. We've worked with Bartlett in the past, and after the meeting 2 weeks ago, we felt it was prudent to have someone, an expert, go out and take a look at the trees. So they were recommended for a landscape architect as, leading experts in the area, and provided the report for us.
Okay, I have a copy of that I can share with the rest of the commissioners, but before well, actually, now would be a good time to do that, I presume. And then we will also get the other in live testimony candidates after Ms. Buckeister, because we don't want to make them wait all night. But let me go ahead and try to share that with everyone. It's a good piece of evidence.
I would also add that Bartlett was not paid. It was an independent assessment of the trees. They did not request to be paid.
Well, requested by the applicant, but unpaid. Okay.
Not requested. Just he offered it. They offered it. They did not want to be, on one side or the other. They just wanted to make an independent assessment at our request.
Okay. So Bartlett was requested by the applicant, unpaid, trying to be independent and in good faith. We'll hope that they are here. And there we go. I'll display this for everyone. And it's a 39-inch diameter, looks like DBH chestnut oak. And I'll give everybody a quick second to read those two paragraphs. I think it's important. And Ms. Buckheister, if you can't read this, the last sentence by Mr. Tyler Balderson, who is a board certified master arborist, says, "It is my recommendation to remove this tree and replant with new trees that will adapt to the new site." After 2 paragraphs of explaining why it would not be a good idea to keep the tree there, may not be a good idea.
So do we not have a city arborist report?
It's interesting.
We do.
You say that. We have that. We have more information to present here. We're going through one at a time. So.
Okay.
And there's a second report with this PDF because there's 2 trees.
Yeah, Mr. Brian Adams has that at second, but let's get through this one first. Let's do one at a time. So was everybody, all the commissioners, were you able to see that that comment there? And I'll scroll down for the trees.
Excuse me, Ben, when this Alderson report, there's actually 2 reports. There's one for each tree. You follow up, Ben? You're on page 5.
I got to scroll down, so let me scroll down for it and we'll continue on. Thank you. So that was for the chestnut oak, I believe, and we'll go ahead and shows pictures of the driveway. If you can't see this for the commissioners, let me know. Can't really see much in that photo. We will stop the share of that item. The only thing I have is that one report from the arborist on that tree. So I did not get the second one.
Ben, can I just go back to what I was saying? In that PDF you were just sharing, there is a second report from Tyler Balderson for the pin oak that's also on the site.
And I don't have that. I don't have that report in my database here.
I think if you scroll up on that same PDF, it's right there.
On the same one?
Yeah, same one.
Well, I'll be. Technical issue on my end. My apologies. Thank you for that. And we'll share that real quick. And then this is the other tree. 37-inch pin oak. Okay, everyone should have a quick chance to read that. And in summation, the same closing sentence of its recommendation to remove the tree and replant with new trees that will adapt to the new site. So basically the same, almost the same assessment, it seems, and conclusion. And Ms. Buckheister or commissioners have any comments with regard to that arborist report?
So they both say they're in fair condition. They haven't done a thorough root inspection, but but where they're located, it seems to be an issue. And there could be, if something was severe down the line, they could be an issue, is what I'm reading. but they're both in fair condition and they both have they didn't do a thorough inspection of the roots. And there's no major decay in either of them.
And that seems to be the case from what I interpret from it is also, but with construction, removal of the driveways and whatnot, the recommendation is to.
Yeah, is their opinion. I understand.
This is Bevan Bukeister. So I mean, I don't know if I would just like to be able to have to make a recommendation on full information, and I'd like to see the city arborist report. That's why we asked for this, a short continuance of this hearing. Also, I couldn't see, their arborist report on here, and I don't see it in the documents that I got from the planning commission either. So,
okay, well, we'll make sure you get that as soon as possible. I can email that to you. I'll try to email that to you right now while we're doing this.
Okay.
And also, Bevan rolls right into what the city has done on their end. So without further ado, any commissioners have any problems with us rolling into what the city assessment would be from Mr. Adams?
Mr. Chairman, as a point of interest, this is Stephen Hyde speaking. Could city attorney or someone please clarify for me, for the record, what role the Annapolis Environmental Commission has in the major site design plan review process?
Thank you. This is Joel Breakway from the Office of Law. Chapter 14, which has the Annapolis, the Environmental Commission, seems to be inapplicable to the Chapter 17 discussion that we're having here today for the site review plan. Despite some representations that Chapter 14 should apply, it's clear that Chapter 14 is applicable to the proceedings before us today, and that's why the AEC, for example, would not have received prior information about this program, and that's in my reading of the applicability standards, and I could actually display that on the screen if I may share my screen briefly.
Go ahead, Joel, take it.
Okay. So in chapter 1412 that talks about trees, they talk about our policy and then the applicability. The applicability states, I have to move this, okay. This chapter applies to all trees planted in or adjacent to any public areas and to all trees and shrubs planted in and on any private properties, private premises rather, which endanger the life, health, or safety of persons or property. So unless there is a safety issue with the trees, like they're eminently about to fall on someone's property or they are planted in a public area, I don't see how there can be an argument that Chapter 14 applies. And you see Chapter 14, of course, includes the Environmental Commission and then talks about the various responsibilities and the damages, again, to tree in public areas.
Mr. Brathwaite, could you scroll it so that we could see the Environmental Commission section?
Sure, the Environmental Commission section, there's a discussion of what their rights and responsibilities are, but again, I interpret Chapter 14 to apply to public trees because of the applicability section of this code.
Mr. Chair, may I make a point of order here or point of information?
You know what, Mr. Savage, go right ahead at this point. Go ahead.
Just to clarify, I did check with the city attorney and deputy city manager for sustainability, and Chapter 14 and 17 both apply in this case. And there is additional code governing the Environmental Commission, which allows them to make comments to other boards and commissions.
I don't doubt that they're able to make comments, but as far as jurisdiction is concerned, they don't have any jurisdiction because this, unless...
Well, I wasn't finished, Mr. Joel, and they don't have any quasi-judicial powers. They're purely recommendatory board. So they can say what they want. There's no weight in the force of law other than just simply provide recommendations for your information.
So in the law, we say that goes to weight, not admissibility, meaning that you can hear the information, but you must give it an appropriate weight. And because, in my opinion, Chapter 14 would not apply in this particular instance, Chapter 17 clearly does apply. And I believe when you speak to planning and zoning, you'll hear how planning and zoning sees the situation. The other thing is that since planning and zoning is in charge with interpreting the statute, their interpretation should be entitled to some deference. And does anyone need me to continue on to Chapter 17, or have I answered the questions?
For me personally, as the chairman, anybody who's a member of any commissioner who is a member of the city public can come and comment to us on any application, and we will consider it as need be legally. So it doesn't matter to me if she's given her testimony or not. So yes, we're taking it all. Take in anybody A to Z who's a resident of the city and as well as outside the city. But I understand Mr. Hyatt's concern of where it applies in the code. And Mr. Braithwaite, thank you for that explanation.
Thank you for clarifying.
Any other issues from the commissioners with regard to those reports before we go to Mr. Brian Adams to share his data, which I think we're all eagerly awaiting. Let's go ahead and get this going. All right, Mr. Adams, can you go ahead and testify, please, and I will share your reports. And Mr. Adams, you're muted. Make sure this is the right one.
There we go. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I've got your report up there. Can you see it?
Yep, I can see it. So as it says on Tuesday, December 1st, I was requested to go out and look at these two trees, evaluate the condition of the two trees located at 101, 103 Annapolis Street. There was a 37-inch pin oak tree, a 39-inch chestnut oak tree to evaluate. Both appeared to be in fair condition for the age and location of the trees. Some deadwood present, but also some heavy pruning in the past by BGE due to the power lines being right next to the trees. But I did not notice any significant decay within those trees that would lead me to believe that they're in decline. One oak did have a good bit of ivy in it, which can be detrimental to trees, but that can easily be remedied by cutting the ivy at the base of the tree and letting it die. The biggest problem I see with these trees is the root zones. Both of them have a driveway right at the base of their tree. Each of them, if you're looking at them from the street, they both have a driveway to the right, and it's right up against the base of those trees. So they've suffered some pretty significant impacts to the root zone. Further, I do not see the ability to protect these trees in this root zone with the construction as planned, certainly as planned. And if we were to move it back to the current setback on the rest of the street, we still have two structures underneath the trees that need to be demoed, and as well as all the work that would have to occur. You know, even if we move the building back, the construction activity is going to come out towards the street, and I just think it's going to be too far into the critical root zone of both of those trees. Oaks as a species don't respond well to impacts to the roots. They're mature trees, which also have a harder time responding to root zone impacts. You know, I think there's a possibility that we could potentially find a way to protect the chestnut oak, which would be the one that's a little further away from the building and closer to the street. But I don't see any way of protecting the pin oak tree. I think you'd have more than 50% of the root zone impacted by construction.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that all you have? Or?
I'll just add that I did, you know, after reviewing the plan, I agree with Bevan's testimony that the plan for the ornamental cherries is certainly not, I don't think that's reasonable for this site. I think if you're taking these two trees out, we need to find a way to put in some large canopy trees that are going to grow to be mature shade trees. And that may take some redesign of the building and possible silva cells for some other type of structural changes that would allow for a mature tree and a larger tree.
Okay. And Mr. Adams, can you tell me who asked you to go out to the site and make this assessment?
Yes, my Tom Smith, Planning and Zoning.
Okay. And based on what you just said, you said I want to get this correct. Which tree do you think did not have the possibility of being saved in the current design?
The pin oak.
The pin oak is not saved by the current design. And is it your opinion that the pin oak could be saved by change of the design? Radical change or?
No, not the pin oak.
Not the pin oaks. Pin oak's off the charts.
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, fair enough. Then the other tree as well is in your recommendation with the current design is not going to make it, correct?
Correct.
Unless there was some radical design change, or you're talking a minor design change from your perspective, which you're not an architect.
Yeah, it would need to involve probably moving the building back to at least the current setback for that street.
Okay, and that's your opinion. All right, thank you, Mr. Adams. Any commissioners have any questions for Mr. Adams in his tree assessment?
I do. I have a quick.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Alex.
So with respect to both of those trees, but specifically not the ivy covered one, the other one, given it that it's there's a driveway right up against it, so you feel that that's already causing the tree some stress, and that's regardless of what's happening with this development, the fact that there's an existing driveway there is already causing that tree some stress.
Yeah, I think that long term, I think it certainly had an impact. But for the tree, if the roots were severed there when that driveway was put in, I don't know how old the driveway is, but the tree is doing fairly well. As I said, it's in fair condition, especially for a tree of that age. So, but I do think that there's some problems with the roots currently.
So let me ask, what's your estimate of the lifespan of that tree, given
Thank you.
that it's up against the driveway, and that as it grows further, it's going to no doubt require some more significant pruning by BGE. And given where it is with the power lines and the driveway, what's your estimate of the lifespan of that tree, if nothing happened, just as it is now?
Okay, so if it were left as is, I would say it would probably have another 10 to 15 years, I would expect.
And if there is more stress on it due to whatever construction, what would you say
I think you bring it down to less than 5 years. I think what happens if we have more than like 30% impact to the critical root zone of those trees, I think what we'll see is that the trees may last a year or two, and then we'll see it decline.
Okay, thanks. Those are the questions that I had, Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Pline. That was very useful questions there. Any other commissioners?
I
Yes.
just had a question. Oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay. Brian, normally when you do a site visit, you look at all the trees and you do like a tree inventory. Is there any reason you didn't do a full site inventory of the trees and their DBHs and their replacement value and the health of the other trees on site?
No, I was just asked to go out and evaluate the trees. I didn't know sort of what this would become. I didn't know that there was another arborist report. So I just went out to do a fairly casual assessment of the trees.
And did you get to read the other arborist report before you did yours?
No, I have now though.
And then I guess the question I have is, are you planning to do a full inventory, site inventory?
No, was not planning to go any further at this point.
Because that's helpful for us in terms of knowing, how many trees really are necessary. I think, in our meeting last time, we had a couple of different views of how many trees were necessary. So it would be good to just know from your perspective, because you're our expert, so to speak, on these issues. So if there's any chance that you could do a full site inventory and come back to us with what you think the number of trees is that should be replaced, and if there's some way to respond to the question of the one tree that might potentially survive, how it would survive, that would be great. The chestnut oak, the one that's closer to the street. Also, do you know if the test for the leaf scorch came back? The arborist or the developer mentioned that they sent it away for some testing, and I don't see anything in the comments that were prepared today by anyone that leaf scorch test has come back.
No, I'm not aware of any tests coming back.
Okay.
And to answer your other questions, I'm not sure what else you would like me to assess. I can tell you now that if those trees were to be removed, I would expect that we'd be able to get at least 2 or 3 mature trees in, canopy trees planted in there with some change to the site design up front. Because as it currently stands, they're planters, I believe, that they're planning to use for the trees. And so, with some changes to the site at that place, we could, up front, we could most likely fit at least 2 larger trees.
Oh, that's great news. Okay, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
And one follow-up question: if a new pin oak were planted someplace, what's the number of years it would take to have a sort of a similar canopy kind of cover? I realize the existing trees are maybe 80 years old or something, but how many years would it take to have something that's sort of substantial of similar sort of coverage? Not exactly, but something comparable.
Very difficult question to answer because it depends on the site, the tree, where you're planting it, the soil conditions. If it's in ideal, let's say it's in the ideal planting location and it gets the right amount of sunlight and it gets water, it's going to take, I'm thinking 50 years to get to the point that it's, canopy is as widespread as the current.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Adams, this is Bob Waldman. Let's take a look at the chestnut oak. What's the root spread on these things? Does it go to the drip line or extend beyond the drip line?
Typically, it would extend beyond the drip line.
And it's a little difficult without like plans and specifications in front of us, but from where the trunk of that tree is to where, even if the building were, any construction were set back, what's the distance? Were you able to look at the plans? That's the first question, actually.
Yes, I have looked at the plans.
And what kind of a spread do you need, distance do you need from the trunk to the edge of the root activity?
So we need at least to the drip line of that canopy, and that canopy goes back over the current building and would extend beyond where the proposed building would be. Ideally, you would go further out. You would go 1.5 feet for every inch of DBH, but the drip line is a minimum.
And the tree at this point already extends over the existing buildings, which are on the setback that runs all along the street there?
Yes.
So already it's being impacted by that building?
Correct.
Okay. What would be, would there be a salient beneficial effect if the driveway is removed and replaced with real soil?
So the chestnut oak, if that's what we're talking about, it sits right on that property line.
Yeah.
And so the driveway is actually on the other property, not on the property we're talking about here tonight.
not on 103, but on 105?
Correct.
Oh,
The other side of the tree, and the tree's on the property line.
okay.
I don't have a survey, but it's from what I
Okay.
know, that would be on the other property.
Okay, okay. Good. I'm glad I asked that question. And then turning our attention to what might be replacing it, what sorts of trees would do well planted on the Annapolis Street side that would not ultimately interfere with power lines?
I think that to get any sort of mature canopy tree, you're going to have some impact from the power lines. They need to be set back enough that they're not under them. But if we can pull them back off the street enough to be adjacent to the power lines, the pruning can occur, and we can have a tree that continues to grow up next to them and gets a mature canopy like the ones we have now. But it needs the right amount of space. Oaks are throughout that area. You've got willow oaks, you've got red oaks, chestnut oak, pin oak. Any of those trees would be good replacements, but you could also look at American elm or some other sort of shade tree, something that would do well in urban conditions. But
do trees other than oaks tend to do better than oaks in urban conditions?
yeah, there are a number of trees that would do better in urban conditions. There are some trees that are tougher than oaks when it comes to surviving in urban areas, but the oaks in Annapolis in general, they've done very well. You see that throughout the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They are the prevalent species for the city, right behind maples.
Okay. And in terms of root volume, if you planted an oak or something that is similar to that, an elm, but something that would grow large, what kind of soil volume would be needed to sustain a tree which would ultimately become large?
I'd have to get back to you on that. I couldn't answer that right now.
Too technical. I got you. I hear you. Well, I very much appreciate your observations. I thank you very much, and hopefully you'll hang around a bit. There may be further questions along these lines.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners with questions? Hold on, Mr. Pound. I see your hand. Any other commissioners with questions of Mr. Adams at the moment? Okay, from the Planning and Zoning Department, is there any other tree assessment or person that we need to bring up with regards to the tree other than before we go to the other witnesses that we already have at hand? And Tom Smith, I have a quick question for you. So there we go.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, my quick question is, seems like Mr. Adams and others have related in their documentation that I've seen for the replacement of the tree that is removed be of like, it seems to be of a like type species or character. And I know we did a 4-to-1 when we had the briefing a couple of weeks ago during the applicant's presentation. So 4 trees for each one that was removed. But being smaller ornamental type cherry trees to get under the power lines, I get that. Are you aware of, or can you explain if that is correct, that it has to be a like species or in character? I need more explanation on that. I'm not sure.
Sure, Mr. Chairman. I think that language is stated, as Ms. Buchheiser spoke earlier, in Title 1412. And I happen to agree with Joelle that section is not applicable here. If you look at 1709, that's the section that is applicable. So we try hard to replace trees with like species, but it certainly depends on the conditions. Sometimes there are better species that might work better in a particular urban condition, particularly if you're going to alter the existing soils from their existing composition. So But to go back to Mr. Walden's question on soil volumes, we work hard to try to get, maybe it's close to 1,000 square feet, 900 to 1,200. But that's going to take additional practices to make that happen.
Such as what?
Providing additional root volume space within the area. You could be looking at devices like civil cell structures, where then that allows roots to grow under pavement in other areas and connecting tree pits together. These are been used in all sorts of urban conditions. I think Bethesda Streetscape is probably one of your best examples.
Could you explain to us why these oak trees are so subject to root damage in construction? What is it?
Well, I would say Brian is probably more qualified than I am in that. So oak tree roots are no more or less sensitive than any other tree roots. It's certain trees tolerate construction better than others. And oak trees, for whatever reason, and I might let Brian get into the science on that, do not tolerate construction impacts well. And old trees, such as these, as 80-year-old trees, like 80-year-old people, do not tolerate impacts well either. If these were smaller, younger trees, they would have a better chance.
Got it. And Tom, Mr. Smith, I've got Ms. Buckheister's typed thing sharing here on the screen, her type submission. It shows section 1709 of the code. The city code says replacement trees will reflect the density and species of those trees necessarily removed for development.
I think she's perhaps referring to 1412 there, Mr.
Chairman. So? Okay. All right. I'll stop that share there.
Hey, Ben, I'd just like to jump in, and I don't mean to, but I did read quite a few of the comments from various people, including the one from Ms. Buchheister. And it is true that 17.09.060 and the title of that section is Trees in the Development Area. And it says replacement trees. It is the intent of this section to ensure that landscaping proposed in association with development will reflect the density and species of the trees necessarily removed for development. So I think we're in the right code section, if that was confusing. We're all on the same page. I think that was, I'm not sure how somebody got that confused.
All right, well then, so we need a clarification on that then, I guess, which we just had from Diane. Thank you.
Sure.
Tom, could you tell me in planning and zoning, our approval or how it gets, it's obviously been approved as okay for those 4 trees to be those ornamental type cherries as they're described to be a replacement for those larger trees. Can you tell me who in the planning and zoning department approves that, or is it just written in they said, yeah, who does that? Who makes that approval? Comes across your desk, obviously.
Certainly. It does. The planning staff who review site design proposals, of which we have 3 landscape architects on staff, registered landscape architects who review.
All right. That's what I wanted to hear right there. There's no arborists, but landscape architects, which deal with, that's kind of that's an expert in that realm. That answers my question. So in summation, in my mind, what we're seeing so far is the trees are already aged. They're most likely going to have to be removed with the current design. They're not going to live much longer because we're talking less than 20 years at best, or 15 years at best for both these trees. And a lot of the comments that I've heard and read from people are, if we can't keep these trees, which it kind of seems to me from our own city arborist, which it's going to be the way, which it's kind of agreement with the applicant there from the city arborist to their arborist that they asked to go out there. And then their application that the trees won't be there, won't make it. That now comes down to the question in my mind of, well, what kind of trees do we put in there? And it seems to be where everybody's going with this conversation. But now to get this meeting moving along, we've still got Mr. Adams here, the city arborist, for questions from the commissioners. Are any last minute questions by the commissioners? And then we will go on or other in-person attendees to make testimony. And we can always come back to Mr. Adams later if he just so chooses to hang around. Any other questions by the commissioners for Mr. Adams?
I would, since this subject got raised, which is what makes oaks different from other species?
Mr. Adams?
Sorry.
Well, we can move on to other comments.
Mr. Adams, you want to answer the question? Mr. Wallman asked, what makes oaks different from other species?
Well, oaks as a species, I don't know the exact science. I just know from field experience in dealing with these types of trees and other types of trees. And it's also the age. As Tom alluded to, it's sort of like a person. The tree is slowed down in its uptake of nutrients and water, and it just has a harder time responding when it loses roots. It is, when it's mature, it's sort of done leafing out and putting out new leaves. It's very slow to put out new growth, and so that's their food source. And when it loses roots and can't pull as much water and nutrients out of the ground, it's just tends to lead to decline. And as I said,
if nothing was done to the property, how long both of those trees would live, roughly, in your best guess?
Can you repeat that?
In your best guess, if nothing was done at all to the property today, how long would those trees live?
I think they could live another 15, 20 years. And then I think that they would begin to, show decay if BGE continues to trim them. And you will begin getting more dead branches in the trees that would need to come out.
Okay.
And as street trees, we've got a higher, we don't have as high a tolerance for risk. So when trees like that start producing more dead wood and stuff starts falling, we're not able to leave a tree standing for as long as it might stand in a natural area. A natural area, that tree may last another, 10 years in addition to that 20, just because, it can take the limbs falling out of the tree and still be alive, just in decline.
Become a safety issue in the next few years?
Right. That's my concern, is that in the long term, over the next, 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to see branches start to die off, and then that does become a safety issue just because of where they're located.
Would that be accelerated by construction on the site?
In my opinion, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions by the commissioners of Mr. Adams? And we'll keep them around. All right, Mr. Adams, please stay around, and we'll go. We have some aldermen that have shown up for testifying, and we'll go in order of them as we heard that they wanted to come here. So, Mr. Savage, I'd like to have you go first, but if you'd like to defer to Mr. Payon because you're doing something, that's fine as well. So, Alderman Savage.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Could I be heard real quick?
No, hold on. Mr. Hyatt, we'll get to you after Mr. Savage. And we'll hear you after Mr. Savage, if that's okay. Because right now we're in the commissioner public testimony phase. So
sure, but I had questions for one of the commissioners and Mr. Adams.
Just hold on a second. We'll get Mr. Savage and we'll go right back to you, Mr. Hyatt. Thank you. Mr. Savage.
Mr. Chair, I would like to yield first to, or defer first to Alderman Payon, since it's his ward, if I could go after him.
Okay, Mr. Payon.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Over to you, Mr. Payon. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alderman Savage and Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of questions of Mr. Adams. He may or may not be able to answer them. First of all, I'd like to compliment him on the report he did with very short notice. But therein lies the key to my main issue here. Do you have any idea why you weren't asked to do a report like this much sooner than 2 days beforehand? I mean, this is a project that's been on the books for a year and a half. this is not your fault. You did a really good report. I've got nothing but kudos for the work you've done. But this is ridiculous. I mean, I hear nothing for a year from my constituents, and it's not their fault. They didn't really know, more than 2 weeks ago that this was coming. There's not a lot I can do in that short period of time if I want to do anything. I'm really not in a position to advise people that I voted on to advise me on what to do on these types of things. But good grief. I mean, following up on one of the commissioner's prior questions, you don't get a chance, seems to me, to look at the other reports. You don't you don't really have time to look at all the trees in the site. Are these things that would help you, in your opinion, to the commission tonight? Mr. Adams?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I would agree. This was relatively short notice. This whole issue has just sort of sprung up here in the last, I don't know, a few days, maybe a week at the most. And my email continues to be filled with comments from the public. To your question as to why there was such short notice, I think it's just an issue of I was previously in the Office of Environmental Policy. I've now been moved to the Planning and Zoning Department. I think it's just a lack of communication between departments. I've only been, a part of that department now for a few weeks to a month or so. So that's the only reason I can give as to why I wasn't, notified of the issue earlier.
Well, I just want to make sure people understand this is not Mr. Williams or Mr. Rumpke's fault. This is not the commission's fault. It's not. It's certainly not my constituents' fault. They would like to have had much more time to be heard. And I don't know this thing's coming. There's very little work. Very little I can do behind the scenes. I'm really not allowed to, in my opinion. But thank you for your good work. I would certainly ask the commission chair and Dr. Nash if we can do better than this, and isn't there something we can do in the future to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen, because this is ridiculous. I mean, heck, I didn't even know where the trees were on the property until a couple of days ago, and that's not fair. That's not a great way to do business. It's not a good reflection on the city and the way we work.
I got a question for you and a point. As the commission, when do we see these items? Obviously, when we get them for our review. We're not going to be privy to the entire application and what it details prior to submission of planning and zoning going through Tom Smith. I mean, there is those hints, obviously, and what's going on in West Annapolis, and there's talk, and you hear that. But the applicant, supposedly from their testimony, met with the neighborhood association of West Annapolis and basically went over the building design and the plan with them. One would have thought that during that talk with the neighborhood association and all that time spent, that they would have been aware that those trees were coming down. It seemed from previous testimony at our last meeting that there were some people from West Annapolis that were already aware that those trees were coming down. So I'm wondering where's the disconnect from the neighborhood association to the developer to what we see here today? Were they presented something different? I hadn't had anybody really tell me that it was drastically different, but just somewhat. So do you know any answer of what you've heard, Mr.
No, from what I understand, it was an excellent presentation, but I don't think they can. They don't know that these trees are an issue ahead of time, and I don't know that we talked or that they talked much about it. I appreciate your point, and let me emphasize, I sure don't think it's the commission's fault in any way, shape, or form. I can only look back at the city itself, and I think the failure to communicate is what we're talking about here, and that it's a real problem in this type of situation.
With all due respect, this application has been in the Office of Planning and Zoning for months, and my impression from the presentation was that this was discussed and that the applicant brought information to the planning department, that there was discussion about it. Perhaps there should have been a referral to the city arborist. Perhaps in the future, there will be those referrals as a matter of course. There was a departmental reorganization. Things were a bit unclear, but it's not as if people ignored this subject. It's just that it's coming to the community's attention now. And it's very difficult to bring things to the community's attention. There's been a pandemic for the past 7 months. E-Tracket has been down. It's very difficult for any citizens to just keep track of everything that's going on. And so that's the way things occur. I don't think we should be pointing fingers or anything at anybody. And that's a good reason why we have this 2-week interregnum between the initial presentation, the chance for people to weigh in, the chance for us to have gotten more information. So I'm not displeased. In fact, I'm quite happy to see that people have responded. We're getting a lot of information. We're talking a lot about these things. And I expect to hear more about this subject as we move along through the hearing.
Okay, other commissioners with comments? Any other commissioners with comments for Mr. Payon at the moment? Okay, Mr. Payon, thank you very much for your testimony. It is appreciated. And we'll move on to Mr. Savage. And Mr. Payon, can you hang on for a little bit in case we come back to you, or are you pressed for time? You got a few more minutes?
Sure, I do.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you for allowing me to be heard, Mr. Sale.
Well, it's your right to be heard. There you go. All right, Mr. Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the record, Rob Savage, 12 Wind Whisper Lane. So my written testimony has information on my background and qualifications when it comes to forest and tree assessments, so I won't go into that now. I'll just jump right into it. My primary concerns do revolve around these 2 specimen trees located on Annapolis Street. I did watch parts of your last meeting and heard the concerns raised about their health, including earlier in this meeting. And it seems like there are 2 primary health concerns, the canopy and the potential disease. And so I do want to spend some time talking about those. So first of all, the canopy, in my judgment, the pruning hasn't been too detrimental considering the age of these trees. And it was implied that there might be some imbalance, but typically when you see a tree that has been imbalanced, you'll see that the roots start to pop up out of the ground or the trunk's starting to lean. And we've seen no indication of that out at this site. So I don't think the pruning is a severe issue. Because again, these trees have been like that way for a while at this point. Regarding the disease, the leaf scorch, as was also indicated by others, the leaf scorch alone is insufficient to kill an otherwise healthy tree. And I think these trees do seem otherwise to be healthy and not in decline, as the city arborist indicated. And the health is important to assess when determining if it can or should be protected or saved. And again, the signs to me indicate good health, but the bottom line is it really needs to be factored in, is that the pictures themselves that was in the developer's applicant's package show trees that are actually flourishing and doing rather well, despite the stresses that they've been under. And if you scroll down a little bit in that testimony, I think I put one picture in there from the application that shows, there you go, the nice, really good leaf coverage there. It's typically when you have trees that have leaf blight, you'll start to see the leaves brown and thin out, and you don't see that. So I do think it's, there are a lot of possibilities that were brought up in some of the arborist assessments, but we have to look at the actual field conditions of these trees, and they appear to be rather healthy. And so if the health really isn't a major issue, then the question becomes, can it survive the proposed development's construction and final design? And this is always a hard question to answer. One important factor to look at is the disturbance to the critical root zone, as Mr. Adams and others mentioned. And obviously, if the impact of this area is reduced, then that increases the chance of survival. And again, as Mr. Adams mentioned, the major impact to this root zone are from construction activities such as excavation, but also compaction from heavy equipment traveling past the trees. And to that point, I think if it is decided that these trees should get protected, I suggest the construction entrances be removed off of Annapolis Street. They did have a construction entrance on Giddings that they could use, but that would help protect these trees even further. In any case, the way I'd recommend reducing impact to this area, to the critical root area for these trees would be, and also again, thus increasing the tree survival chances, would be to push the building back, push the footprint back to the existing setback, or perhaps even a foot or two past that, because I think that would put it in line. That would put it in line with the other structures on the street, on this section of Annapolis Street, and doing this could reduce the new impacts to the western tree critical root zone by less than 10%. So again, that could reduce the impact to less than 10%. That's pretty, it's a low number. So I think a tree would typically can withstand that kind of impact to their critical root zone. Doing so on the eastern tree, which is the one on the left in the picture, could reduce the impacts to less than 20% of the critical root zone. And I'm talking about new impacts to the critical root zones. So again, these are relatively minor impacts to these root zones of any trees, and it's entirely survivable. And furthermore, the overall impacts to these root zones could be reduced even further by removing the existing driveway in between. It's located, let me see that picture, I think it's to the right of that tree on the left, in between the trees. And also removing the walkways and the porches that are out in the front of the property between the building and the sidewalk. And this would actually represent a bit of a restoration that could result in a net reduction of impacts to the root zones that they had even pre-development. And so just to reemphasize that, I think, again, if they remove some of the existing impervious surface in the front, they could actually have a net reduction in impacts to the trees, creating less impact than we even see currently. And that would, again, just be removing some of those surfaces, as I think was mentioned a little bit, into removing the driveway and walkway and putting down new topsoil, aerating the roots, putting down fertilizer. Because I really don't think these trees have received much care over the past 80 years that they've been around. So again, in my opinion, it's entirely feasible to protect and indeed enhance these trees. But of course, there do need to be some trade-offs. If the buildings get pushed back, then the developer may lose some parking spots. But that's easily addressed through a variance for the parking requirements. They may also need to have an elevated boardwalk style outdoor seating area, or have it be on a second story, both of which would take adjustments. Because I did see in the plan that they want to have street side outdoor dining. But again, I don't see why they couldn't do this on some kind of elevated platform that would still allow water through to the roots and allow the roots to breathe. And so I'll admit I find it frustrating that when two laws are found to be in conflict, such as the parking and the tree, the environmental ones often are the ones to go first. And as I indicated, both chapters 17 and 14 would apply in this case. And I have checked again with the city attorney and deputy city manager regarding, in general, if those two chapters could apply. And since these are public trees are located within 29 feet of any right-of-way, that would kick in or trigger chapter 14. But in any case, it's really not too relevant, because both sections of the code allow for and clearly encourage protection of such trees. But in any case, my point is that I don't see any compromise on the part of the applicant. They're proposing to remove all of the trees on this site. They're not trying to protect any of them. So rather than design their project around the natural resource, around the trees on the site, they're trying to manipulate and adjust the site to meet their design. I think that's the wrong way to go about things. The other related concern of mine is the impact to the rest of Annapolis Street. And this is just really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to redevelopment on this street in the future. I know the applicant owns a number of properties on this street. So if we allow all of the future redevelopment to move their setbacks closer to the street, what's going to happen to the rest of the trees in this area that are located beyond the proposed setback? So if you look down the road, most of the buildings on this section of street are set back much further. By being set back further, I think as Mr. Adams mentioned, it allows us to plant larger canopy trees away from the wires as they currently are. But if we allow them to have those setbacks closer to the road, which you would be doing with this project, that prevents us from really planting large canopy trees down the street boulevard. So that's a significant change to the character, I think, that needs to be considered and factored in. So whether we like it or not, we are setting a precedent with this project for the future. And I just have 2 final points. I guess based on what I've seen, this is not a precedent I can support. I'd recommend you send it back to be reworked so that these trees are not only protected, but enhanced. Again, these are around 80-year-old trees that take just as many years to be fully replaced. They provide enormous value to the city and the community. And based on the most recent update to our tree canopy study, the city has lost canopy coverage over the past 10 years. And Ward 2 has experienced many of those losses. So I hope I made it clear that I think we do have an alternative here, that you have an alternative here. And it's just a matter of utilizing our existing code that allows for us to require such changes. And if you let me say one final thing, I speak to classes of first graders at my son's school every year when they tell me what kind of laws and improvements they want to see for the city and what they want me to pass. And the first thing they always say, it's pass laws to save the trees. And well, I and we, since Alderman Payon's here, we've passed the laws to protect the trees, and now I'm asking that they be utilized to do just that. So thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Savage. I'll throw out a quick one here. What I'm hearing from the certified arborists is that these trees are reaching somewhere along the lines of their 80th percentile of life. And I look at these trees and I like them, I love them, they're wonderful. But from a planning perspective, when we look out, 40 years in the future, and this is the chance where the property is getting redeveloped. If you have a tree that the arborists tell me if you develop there, it may only last another 15 to 20 years, maybe a little bit longer. I start thinking, well, what's going to happen in 20 years then when those trees have to be removed for safety reasons or some other issue? What's going to kick in? Are they going to have to replace 4 at that time? And then we have a problem with how do we design around that? Or we're just going to have 2 brand new large growth trees that are going to take another 80 years to grow rather than have multiple smaller trees. So I'm not the expert. What do you think about that 15, 20 year expected lifespan that I seem to be hearing from the arborists? And instead of trying to save that, going with a better design of multiple trees.
Yeah, well,
They too.
I think, if you asked my 70-year-old parents, I think they would kind of disagree. But no, not to be too flip about it, but they are, I think, at their peak and perhaps slowing down, as Mr. Adams mentioned, but I think they are also, on the same hand, providing their maximum benefit. Yes, their uptake of nutrients may have leveled off, but that's still a massive intake of nutrients and water compared to a newly planted tree. You can also look at the actual canopy coverage itself. All those leaves, which you see in that picture in front of you, those provide that transpiration to help provide that clean air. And again, just looking at the volume of leaves, that's much more than a newly planted tree. You also get the other benefit of the shade, the cooling effect of those leaves, which is of utmost importance on these urban streets. Right? These streets heat up, and when these streets heat up, the runoff gets warmer. When you have the warmer runoff, that contributes to the eutrophication, the dead zones in the bay. We want to try to keep that water cooler. And so there are a lot of different benefits. And I think, if there were signs that these trees were in decline, I would be inclined to agree with you. But we've heard none of these arborists have indicated that these trees are, that they've seen anything that they are in decline, and I also have not seen that indication. And there's also the climate aspect, carbon sequestration, which I didn't get into, but that's another benefit. So yeah, I'd say if they're in decline, I tend to agree, but at this point, I think they're worth saving.
Commissioners have questions for Mr. Savage?
I would like to thank Mr. Savage for a very well reasoned and well delivered argument. Thank you.
I have one question, Alderman Savage. I was curious when you were talking about the setback, and you said that it's if it's within 29 feet of the right of way, then you were talking about section 14. Did you say 29 or 25?
I believe it's 25, but I actually need to check that. I couldn't remember if it was 25 or 50. Okay. But it has to do with the right of way and the distance past that. But these trees are definitely within that. But in terms of the setbacks, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I did want to make that point to the chair as well. Because when you're talking about replacing these trees, even if they were to decline in the next 20, 25 years, or even 15 years, and they have to be removed, the benefit to having protect them and pushing that setback back to where these other buildings are is that gives us room to plant new trees right next to where these old ones were. And we can go ahead and plant those large canopy trees, which Mr. Adams said, again, we can plant those large canopy trees, and as long as they're maintained and pruned properly, they won't interfere with the wires. And I think if the city were to do that proactively, then we won't have to worry about BGE going in there on their own and hacking them up. But if we allow those buildings to be built closer to the road, we remove that possibility. We'll never be able to get large canopy trees on this street again until we bury the wires. But that was brought up the last meeting.
And you brought up an important point, which I was going to ask Mr. Paone. The bringing the buildings closer to the street is more of a village type, more dense atmosphere, which our previous comprehensive plan kind of lends to and as an opportunity zone in that area. So hence the reason you have this application coming to us like this. So Mr. Paone, what the feeling in that neighborhood, they want, I believe, is more of a village type, to keep the village type atmosphere, but get a little bit more density. What's your opinion on that from what the people want, Mr. Paone, versus what this project's giving you and the trees there? What do you say?
Well, in general, they're very favorable toward the project itself. They like the design in general and think it's a good idea. They just wish they could put it in, ideally without touching the trees, but in the alternative, doing something that will provide more shade, provide more of a canopy. They'd like to have those trees stay there and have a design that allows for that. But I think the reality is that maybe that's not going to be possible, but they would certainly like to see these replaced by something more than ornamental trees. I think they find that to be unsatisfactory. And the testimonies back that up in terms of providing a canopy. But they like the project.
If I can chime in, I also have heard, everyone excited about this compelling mixed-use project. And I think, Alderman Paone, you're absolutely right. People like the idea of the project. It just, there's overwhelming comment coming in about destroying or losing these two important trees. But Alderman Savage just said something that was interesting, and it triggered something I remember. I was in California and we were at a restaurant where they had an elevated platform. It was basically decking that went around the three trees that shaded the entire restaurant area. It was fabulous. And it allows water to go through the slats, just like if you had a deck at the back of your house. And the trees were happy as can be. In fact, when I was also in California, we went and visited the sequoia trees. And they had massive walkways for thousands and thousands of tourists that go through the forest. And they, obviously were trying to protect the tree roots. And so they just had this elevated platform. It's just like having a deck a few inches over the roots through the entire area. I can actually envision a compromise that gets us what everyone is talking about, the beautiful mixed use that we want in this part of town, right? We would have a restaurant, and we would have 4 living units, and we would have the beauty that we've come to love in West Annapolis preserved, and these trees preserved. This is a great, sometimes planning commission meetings are great because we collaborate and we get to new ideas, but I think that's a real potential. I would urge planning and zoning to take a look at that as an opportunity here. And
well,
so thank you.
Not sure I agree that that's practical in this particular mixed zone situation, but you do bring up some good points, and I think that compromise is possible. Maybe difficult, but be nice if we'd had more than 2 weeks to sit down and try to hammer something out, but it is what it is.
Any other questions for Alderman Savage, Alderman Pound from the commissioners? And I believe what we're showing here, Mr. Savage, is what you spoke about earlier. It's the trees, if they were staying there, then you would have to, and this is the existing design, you would actually have to move it, change some items around there. So I just want everybody to know what they're looking at.
Yeah, that's correct. The dark blue line is the proposed setback. The light blue lines are the existing setbacks. And so that's why I was saying if they did pull back the setbacks to the buildings, they could reduce. The only new impacts to the root zones would be those colors or those areas shaded in red and pencil. And so that's not a huge increase to the impacts to these trees, especially if you free up the other areas of the root.
And Mr. Savage, if something like that were to be done, and the large trees stay, in 25 years, let's say 15 to 20 years, the trees get too distressed and have to be removed. Does that then trigger a 4-to-1 replacement, or just a 1-for-1 replacement at that point? I would think it'd be 1-to-1, right?
Nothing.
That's a good question. I mean, they're technically they'd be public trees, but that'd be a question for Mr. Adams or Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith, what do you think? If those trees were left there, the designs at 15 years from now, and they die, what's required is there a requirement for replacement of those trees? What is it?
I can answer that as part of 1412.
Sorry, I can't see it.
I'm sorry, this is Brian Adams.
City Arborist, thank you.
So if those trees in 20 years needed to be removed, they're private trees, they would trigger a 3-to-1 replacement ratio.
If you have a development site that's already developed and there's no room to put them anywhere, I find what happens. It's kind of confusing for me.
There's different ways to deal with it. So it's a recommended replacement, but it's up to, well, usually it's my discretion, but in the code it reads the Director of Planning and Zoning. But there's also a fee in lieu that can be taken if there's no room on site for planting. In addition to planting nearby, if there's open public space, the trees can go nearby on public property.
So you can see if the trees died in 20 years, you could see 2 trees putting right in there, and then the rest might be maybe fee in lieu. So you, in essence, still maintain 2 trees that would take a while to grow, versus the current design, which I think is a 4-to-1 replacement, but smaller trees. I'm just trying to get the facts out there. I'm not. Okay.
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
There are these green circles here representing, I assume, the circumference of something. I think representing perhaps the drip line. Are those accurate?
It's very difficult for me to tell. I will say that I think you would see more disturbance than is shown there in orange. I think, that's an ideal situation, but with construction, I think you're looking at a lot more than that, especially with the tree that's further back from the road, the pin oak.
Well, let's take a look. Can I
Yeah.
take a look at the chestnut oak? Which is right on the property line? Is that right? Now, the driveway that was being talked about is not part of this application. Is that correct? It's on the next property where that white pickup truck is parked?
If one of the applicants could answer that.
Well, we know that because
that's
if you go
correct.
back to could you take us back to that sketch diagram again, Mr. Savage's sketch diagram? Yes. Yeah, the X is right on the property line. So that green circle from the photographs, it looks to me like the canopy, the drip line is much bigger than what's shown on that green circle. Is that a correct perception of mine?
Yes, I think it would go further back than that, away from the street. I think the front or the street side may be accurate because of pruning by BGE, but I think the back of that tree would extend further.
Yeah, those circles came from, I just traced over top of the existing circles that were drawn on the landscape plan. So I think the applicant would probably be able to answer better than I, but I think they're mostly just standard size circles based on the circumference of the tree.
And I think we'll get a few more comments from commissioners, and we will give the applicant feedback on, because there's been quite a few things going. I want to give them a good 10 minutes or less to do that. Any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Savage or Mr. Pound?
Awesome.
And if you're not talking, please select mute. You can hear some people in the background. Okay, hearing nothing from the commissioners, I'll give Mr. Hyatt a 10 minutes or less, try to feedback on some of the items that have just been presented, if you'd like. Is that satisfactory, Mr. Hyatt?
Well, are we going to have time to go over others? We have a bunch of things to
I'm sure you do. Can we, would you rather address everything at the end and we give you, just take it all there? Because you can just keep building up for that, which is fine by me. And because what I would do if that was the case is I would just go next into the rest of the public comments and display them and get that all done and give you a chance to then provide some feedback. Would you rather do that?
I think my preference would be to finish with the public comment and then present to you our responses and then what we have prepared for you tonight.
I'm with you. That sounds very efficient. Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. All right, Mr. Pound, Mr. Savage.
I think there's a question from Mr. Braithwaite.
Okay, hold on a quick second, Mr. Braithwaite. We have Mr. Pound, Mr. Savage. Is there any other live testimony candidates that we have here tonight? I believe there was one other live person. Looking through the list here.
Yes, Chrissy Holt, and she's unmuted.
Okay, but before we get to her, we'll have Joel give his comment here. Thank you, Ms. Holt. We'll wait on you, and I'll get you in a minute or a couple minutes. Mr. Braithwaite, go ahead.
Sure. I was reading chapter 14, looking for the 25 feet that private trees on private properties within 25 feet of the road belong to the public. I'm not finding support for that. Not to say it doesn't exist. I'm saying I haven't found support yet. So could someone point me at the code section that says that trees within 25 feet of the road, public right of way, belong to the public? And for that, I'll be very thankful.
Mr. Savage, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Smith or Mr. Adams may be able to provide that as well. But my recollection is, because this question came up decades ago when I worked for the city in my other capacity, and it has to do with, I believe, the standard setbacks that are along the road. And from what I recall, it was determined to be that 25 feet. I'd have to look for the exact language, but if I recall, that's not in the code clearly, but it's based on our standard. I see Mr. Smith is invisible now, so.
Mr. Savage, you're right. What the code section says in 1412 is that there's a tree conservation area, and they are established as the same legally defined front, side, a rear yard setback for a zoning district in which is adjacent to the public right of way. If you have a standard setback of 25 feet, you're right, that would be applicable. But in most cases, we haven't established, which in this case is a 16-foot front yard setback. Regardless, those trees are still within that established setback. So you're correct.
Great. Does that help, Mr. Savage, Mr. Smith? Okay, thank you, Joel. Appreciate that. Mr. Savage, Mr. Pound, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next virtual testifier, Ms. Holt. If she could come off of mute and go ahead and take her 3 minutes or so-ish time to make her statement. And I'll go ahead and try to share screen if she has a PDF document in our files.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, my name is Chrissy Holt, and I'm a resident of Ward 2, 8 Fifth Circle. And I didn't know that I was going to be able to speak tonight, so I certainly appreciate it and certainly didn't prepare anything. But I speak as a concerned citizen that we've already lost so much of our canopy, and the conversation tonight is so centered around the property and less around the tree. And when we, if all you have is a hammer, right, everything becomes a nail. And the reality is those trees have been there for 80 years. The trees are there first. And if we continue to treat the trees poorly, putting driveways over them and concrete and not taking the ivy off them, then they're not going to thrive. But if we changed our perspective and allowed them to thrive, as Alderman Savage was saying, then they will be beautiful trees and can last longer. So the fact that there's two issues here, the setback and the tree. The setback, as somebody had mentioned, if it would move, there's plenty of parking lot space back there. There's plenty of room for that property to go back and to preserve the space. So when and if these trees ever do need to come down, that you could certainly place more trees close to the road there. But at a minimum, you could preserve them in this moment. You could keep the property and adjacent to the setback so that these trees have the chance to survive. I mean, in the same moment, you have a master plan for West Annapolis, and you have, it's interesting. It's all men on the master plan for West Annapolis Zoom, and there's a lot of men here tonight. So I certainly appreciate the few women that have been speaking. But, I don't understand why in 1 minute we are paying consultants to figure out green space in the city, and the next minute we're fighting over chopping down 80-year-old trees that have this huge canopy. There's no way the baby trees are going to be able to look as vibrant as they do in the picture that Alderman Savage showed in his testimony. So I am in no way an expert in this, but I would ask that you postpone any decision until you can ask the applicant to do the work, to respect the plants that are there. We've seen this applicant and many developers just continue to put their building before the trees, and the trees are here first, and they need to manage around them. And I would ask the planning committee to please respect the environment, that it's here first. You all are stewards to participate, to preserve these trees that were here before all of us, and to encourage the applicants and the developers to change their plan. We don't get a second shot. If you take these trees down, you don't get to replace them. The builder right now should respect the trees that are in place and build around that. It should not be the other way around, that the building comes first and you put baby trees in replace of them. We're watching what it's doing. It's destroying our air, it's destroying our environment, and it's destroying our bay. And we all put you all in office to preserve all of those. And so we would ask you to go back to the drawing board, get a new plan that respects these trees. We don't preemptively chop down 80-year-old trees just in case they might come down 25 years from now. That's not how we operate, or at least I hope we would stop operating. So I'm really concerned at the perspective of what I'm hearing tonight. I've never participated in one of your meetings before, but I am a citizen watching all of our trees getting chopped down with too many storage units, too many, that the buildings are coming first and the environment is coming second, and would implore you to really change your perspective. Those trees are there, and the builder needs to change there and accommodate the trees that are there, because they were there first, and they're there for the community and doing all of the great things that Alderman Savage talked about in his testimony. So I'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Holt. You are one of our first members of the public to participate in Zoom for comment, so thank you. And I want to ask you, was it fairly easy to use the application process online to get here tonight, to get to the position you're in right now, or was it hard? I just want your quick opinion on that.
Okay, well, the meeting was not advertised that I could find on the website. So no, it was not easy. There was no sign out front suggesting that you were even having the meeting tonight. When I went online, it asked me for the, just find the meeting agenda. I searched the website, there was no agenda. I didn't see the meeting listed on the calendar. So no, I mean, there's a big gap in information going on here, quite frankly. For something this important, these are 80-year-old trees. And I think we can all do better than what's going on here.
So there's some good testimony there. And I also displayed during her talk the written testimony sheet she provided, and she lives at 8 Fisk Circle, which is the Germantown Admiral Heights neighborhood, just to the west of Germantown Elementary School. And that is correct, I believe, Ms. Holt?
Yes, it is.
Okay, we just have to say the address of where everyone lives. So thank you for
I
that.
thought I started that way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Wonderful. And go ahead and mute yourself. Appreciate that. And commissioners, any comments? Anything to add to that before we go on to the rest of the public testimony items? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to the sharing of the rest of the public testimony items. I'll go ahead and go through the PDFs as we have them. I'm now sharing, and we'll start off. There's quite a few of them, but we've already gone through about 5 of them, which is nice. This is from Andrea Clapsey here from Cedar Park Road in Annapolis. Again, concerned about the removal of the trees. Should have had enough time to read that one. And of course, the commissioners were provided these in advance, but we also want to show these to the public. Here's another one from Mr. Hablitzel. Concerned about the tree removal and would like to see larger shade type canopy trees incorporated. Go down here to 8 Fisk Circle, which was just presented, and I showed that one to you. Ms. Holt, that's part of that. Go ahead and forward to the next. There's Bevan Buckheisters, and she lives at 5 Wagner Street. Went through that one. There's Chrissy Holt's actual one. There was Mr. Savage, and now I will open up the rest of them. I know it might seem painful, but I believe it's important we take the 10 minutes to go through these real quickly. Mr. Christy Barrett, Miss Christy Barrett from 460 Schley Road. We'll have Mr. Jim Burdick. Kate Bohannon was also provided earlier with the Annapolis Environmental Commission statement. So we'll move on to Catherine Sanford. Catherine Sanford at 202 Giddings Avenue. It's always good to see people that live really close to where the trees are. Not that it won't affect all of us, but as we hang out in the village of West Annapolis as it grows. Michael Green. Next is Mike Christman, or Christman, not sure how that's pronounced. And also within Mr. Christman's or Christman's comments, he's including Rebecca Brenia from the West Annapolis Civic Association. She is the president, evidently. It's quite a lengthy one, and as again, as from Jim Burdick there, 1719 Cedar Park Road. We've all been provided these, so we'll move right along. Only about 5 more to go. Molly and Peter Smith from Westwood Road, Annapolis. Miss Nina Fisher. Rob Savage has already been presented. So we'll go down to Tom DeKornfeld. And there's just two after that. It's Virginia Woolridge. And finally, the WACA board to the neighbors. That would be the West Annapolis Civic Association. Let's see if I got that one up. This is the last one. And I think it's important to note here that on November 15th, from West Annapolis Civic Association through the community email listing, Mr. Pound, Mr. Savage, in case you were wondering, there was notification by the West Annapolis Civic Association about the Planning Commission hearing that would take place on Thursday, November 19th, which was our one 2 weeks ago. So it's good evidence of the Civic Association putting that news out there. Of course, there's always outliers. We don't always get that information. I guess one could argue that if the West Annapolis Civic Association is putting it out there, are other civic associations getting that? Okay, that does it for the submittals that are new for this meeting. We also had the others that were presented 2 weeks ago. And I will stop the share of that information. Thank you, everyone, for going through that 10 minutes or so right there to get that information out. Now that we've had the public comment live testimony, we've displayed the public submissions via the online submission form as well as emails to the Planning and Zoning Department. Now, as a commission and the commissioners, we can go ahead and talk and debate about the items we've just seen. But Mr. Pound, in case you're time constrained, that would be the next thing. Mr. Pound, did you have something quick to insert?
Yeah, what was the date on the last one from the WACA?
I believe it was November 15th. I'll go ahead and
well, the 19th, I think it's 17th or 19th was the meeting date. I don't think it came out before then.
Sunday, November 15th, from West Annapolis community email to the West Annapolis community email. I guess that's their list and what I'm seeing.
Okay, this Thursday, the 19th. Okay. Thank you.
November 15th. It looks like it was sent. I don't know. You see it, right?
Thank you, sir.
Alex sent it to us on the 19th, so we could see it because I'm not on the on that community Gmail listing. I don't believe, which I should be. You know, one would think and be on all of them.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't think I'm on it either, but I think
I should get on all of those, or they should put me on them. You know, I would hope.
I think it's important. I agree.
Yeah, that's a notice for any of us, especially in the one not just the one you live on, but the others as well. Okay, I'll stop the share on that. So commissioners, based on all the public testimony that you just saw for the last 10 minutes of PDF shares, any comments on that, commissioners? I'll say I get a general theme that they're all leaning towards the trees and that being an issue, with some people saying, hey, let's redesign around it. Other people being shocked at lost tree canopy. Anybody else? Dave, is that a real Christmas tree?
It is a real Christmas tree, yes.
I don't believe you. You have a comment?
No, it's a real fake one.
It is real. I'm sorry, I didn't interject some jest to wake us all up for a second.
Hey, Ben. Ben, I would just like to comment that I was really impressed with the qualifications of some of the people who commented. We have certified naturalists and master watershed stewards, people with bachelors in landscape architecture. And anyway, I just didn't realize we had so many talented people that live in West Annapolis. That was fairly impressive. So anyway, I was very impressed by the level of comment. So thanks for running through that.
And also impressed, quite a few of the applicants, quite a few of the submittals were from people that don't even live in West Annapolis, which means there's a lot of care in Annapolis about, you're going to go enjoy that neighborhood, and it's a one Annapolis. We all worried about everybody else's neighborhood because we're such a small community. We're all going in and out of them, so it affects everyone.
Agreed.
Any other comments by the commissioners? Mr. Pales, this is your area, or Mr. Savage, the alderman that represent larger communities. You kind of saw what was going on there. You have an opinion, Mr. Palin or Mr. Savage?
Well, I have no recommendation. I don't think it's appropriate for me to advise people that I help appoint, along with my colleagues, to advise us as to what to do. I've made that clear to my constituents. They've done an excellent job of representing, as you said, their thoughts on the matter. And I think I just ask you to do the fair thing. My constituents very much favor the project by and large. And they are very concerned about the shade on Annapolis Street and the overall crown of these trees, and want to see them that preserved if at all possible. On the other hand, I think that's probably all I want to say. I don't really think it's appropriate for me to recommend to this commission what to do, since I helped appoint everybody on it. And if something terrible happens, I may have to vote whether to keep people on it. And no, it's just not a good idea.
Okay. I'm just asking you, since it's your area and you represent that area, so we're going to hit you up for any comments.
Well, and I think my constituents have done an excellent job of being heard, making themselves heard under these circumstances, and I encourage them to do that, and continue to encourage them to do that. I think that's the best way for the commission to hear how the people in my ward feel. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alderman Pound. Mr. Savage, any last comment before we're going to proceed on to the next item? Would be going on to Mr. Hyatt and the applicants for their rebuttals. So, Mr. Savage, any last minute comments?
No, I'm glad that to see the input from the community, and based on my conversation with the West Annapolis president of that association, they don't. She told me they don't take stances on many things, and she said they didn't take one on this development, at least not on the overall. And I gotta say, the overall plan, as somebody who visits West Annapolis, I think it'd be great to have that mixed use. It's just finding that balance.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Savage. So our two aldermen, Alderman Savage and Alderman Payon tonight. Is there any other alderman that I'm not seeing online? Or okay, just want to make sure we cover them all. Okay, commissioners, last chance before we go into the applicant for their rebuttals. Okay, Mr. Hyatt, over to you, and feel free to make your rebuttals.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we still have City Arborist Brian Adams with us?
I believe so. Mr. Adams, can you confirm you're still? Yeah, he just unmuted. He's here.
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, Mr. Adams. I have a couple of questions, clarifying questions for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You said that both trees were in, quote, fair condition. Could you give us some context for the range of quality in terms of healthy, dying, fair? Where does fair fall on that scale?
Yeah, fair falls somewhere in the middle. The trees are not negatively impacted by decay. They are not, from what I could tell, they're not stressed, water stressed. Don't appear to have any disease symptoms. So the fair rating is based mostly on the fact that they have been pruned by BGE and that their root systems have been negatively impacted by some of the work around them. So fair is just below good. They're not great and they're not in poor condition. They're fair.
Okay, thank you. And in regards to one of the questions you received earlier about doing a full site inventory, when would you do something like that under the code? Is it required at all?
No, not that I'm aware.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any more questions for you. Chairman, just bear with me. I have a lot of notes to go through here.
Say that again.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, in regards to a couple of the comments we heard about moving the footprint back, the setback, increasing it, I guess, if you will. And you'll hear from others in a moment that we've complied with the average setback that's called for in the code, and shrinking the parking. You also heard from Mr. Savage that there are, conflicting laws in regards to preserving trees and required parking standards, and we've met the required parking minimum and don't believe we would qualify for any type of alternative parking standard because there's nothing unique about the uses that we have contemplated for this site, and I believe that's what alternative parking standards contemplate. I think that the city, maybe Tom or Kevin, if you had a soundbite on that. 2 seconds. Are you both still there?
Hi, Stephen.
Hey.
You asked about alternative parking standards. I mean, an applicant has the right to ask for an alternative parking standard if they believe that what they're proposing has some uniqueness, and I can read that section. And we have done that several times within the city on different development projects. But that's not something that we've looked at all at this point with this application. Not to say that we can't, we just haven't done so to this point.
Okay, well, I don't think you need to read the specific code section, but I guess I was just getting at the point that it hasn't been contemplated because the specific uses are spelled out in the code. So we meet them, we've done what we're required to do, correct? Tom?
I'm just going to read that section, okay. Stephen. Sorry.
Sure.
I wanted to pull it up in my code.
Yep.
Mr. Wallman, can you take it? I got to take a 2-minute restroom break. So
okay.
You have the chair.
So it says there, Stephen, you still there?
Still here.
It says an applicant for a site design plan for a use, and this is in 2166040B, not included in the table, which is not this case, or for a use which the applicant proposes a parking standard different from the table, shall submit a parking needs study. So you could submit a standard that you feel is more applicable here than is in the table. And we would review that. That would be up to you.
Okay, well, we haven't contemplated it, and all of our uses are included in the table that we considered, although we don't have specific uses besides the 4 dwellings identified, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Thank you, Tom. A couple other comments that I heard made in writing from Alderman Savage in regards to Chapter 17, reviewing the discretion, I guess, that the city has in preserving trees. There's also language in that section of the code that addresses when any of those 13 criteria are in conflict. Specifically, it says in 1709-030D that in the event that 2 or more conflicting guidelines are present in the evaluation of preservation of trees on a site, consideration shall be given to those criteria most relevant to the planned use of the proposed development. So the code in this instance weighs more towards considering the development potential of the property. All that to say, we're not just clearing this property and leaving it. We're going to go into a detailed and updated landscape plan that includes numerous replantings. And again, we took your input into consideration when we revisited the landscape plan. So I just wanted to draw that to your attention. And then, I think I can just jump right into our presentation at this point. You have those written comments, and I think what I'd like to do is have Mr. Rumpke address one of the issues that was brought up by the commissioners in our hearing on the 19th as to whether we could combine this project 101, 103 with 100 Ridgely, which is coming before the commission later this month. So I'll hand it off to Mr. Rumpke. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Hey, Leo, can you pull up our slide deck, please?
I can.
So as Leo's pulling that up, I just wanted to reiterate that we're very excited about this project. We've got 2 existing buildings that were built in the 1970s. So they're coming up on almost 50 years of age, and they've really reached their functional obsolescence. And we believe this corner in the neighborhood really presents an opportunity to build something pretty special that will have a long-lasting impact on this community and act as a gathering place for West Annapolis residents as well as residents throughout the city and the region. So just kind of taking a step back to reiterate Stephen's last point, we think that what we've proposed and what we're going to go over is going to be a great, beautiful project that we're hoping to deliver to the community. So, Mr. Waldman, last time we met 2 weeks ago, you asked to see what a concept would look like if we combined this project as well as 100 Ridgely. So if you go to the next slide, Leo, and we can kind of page through these. This is going to outline a couple concepts that basically show what it would look like and how we're losing a pretty significant amount of parking when we do that. So wait for Leo to get this up here.
Can you see my screen?
You're stuck on the first slide still.
Okay, let's see if we can get past that.
And then another comment I'll just put out there as well is that we held what we called an MRE town hall meeting on September 2nd. So, geez, that's, I guess, 3 months or so ago now. But basically, we held a Zoom. We had over 100 people in the community be a part of that, and we went over our 106, 108 Annapolis Street project, as well as talking about this project and just kind of introduce who we are. So we feel we've been pretty, active and transparent in sort of what we're looking to do. in the community with these projects. So here's one concept that shows keeping, I guess this would be what, one drive aisle, and how we would lose 6 parking spaces if we were to combine both of these projects. Go to the next one, please. Same thing, right? If you had the drive aisle on 100 Ridgely, you would be left with the same amount of parking. Same thing here, right? If you sort of put it in the middle, we'd be left with reduced parking for both projects. And then is that the last concept, Leo? Were those the yeah?
Yeah, that's it for the
Yeah. So, Mr. Wellman, I don't know if you have any comments or questions on this, but this was sort of the first thing that we wanted to kind of address and talk about. There's 3 more things that were sort of takeaways from the meeting a couple of weeks ago. The trees and the landscaping being one of them, which we've obviously spent a lot of time on tonight. So we'll jump into that next after this. And then we've also taken a look at the building from a design perspective and tried to incorporate in some of the changes that you guys recommended to us. And we think we're ending up with a better project. So we appreciate the commentary. And then the last one is relating to some of the bike rack locations. So those are kind of the next couple of things we wanted to talk about, and we'll sort of jump into.
Well, wait a minute before you jump.
Sure.
So what I'm looking at, and the two are very similar, the 2 slides, but my first question is there a necessity that the pass through between the 2 lots be a double lane, or is it possible that it could be a single lane?
Well, the code doesn't really allow us to do a single lane in the parking lot. The maneuvering space has to be 24 feet wide, which is about the same as the 3 parking spaces on the left and right of the center drive we would have. So there's really not an opportunity to go to a one-way drive because traffic could be coming in or out of either side. And that's kind of a site design standard that comes from the city. We've had it reduced to 22 feet, but I've never had it reduced anything less than that.
And what is the width of one parking space?
They're 8.5.
Okay, so it's about 2.5 spaces wide.
A little more than that.
Have you ever asked for a variance in terms of that design standard so that the pass through between the 2 lots would be basically the size of one wide parking space?
Yeah, I've asked for it before and I've gotten to 22. That's as low as I've been able to get.
Because
that's for redeveloped sites, so which this might qualify for, but in either case, you still have the necessity to eliminate the 6 spots because they just don't fit.
Well, just as
first of all,
legal point of interest.
I mean, if you could get it down to 4 spots, let's start there.
Yeah, I think that I'll kind of jump in here as well. When we initially looked at this, so we've been studying these different parcels for a year and 8 months. So we've really spent some time looking at what we could potentially do here. One of the issues is that there's split zoning between 100 Ridgely and what we have at 101, 103. So in order for us to execute on a combined project like this, we would potentially have to go through the plan development process. We had conversations with DPZ about that, and they were unclear or uncertain if we would even qualify to go through the plan development process. So we've looked at all this, and we've done the homework and checked the code, and what we've decided to do and ended up with was, pursue both of these projects independent of each other by right, no variances with how the code is written today.
I understand. I understand. And I certainly wasn't present at those meetings as to whether the city would, whether you'd qualify for plan development or not. I mean, you might. I'm not going to get into that weeds on that one. I am, from 30,000 feet, though, going to be saying that a lot of the problems that have arisen tonight that you've heard for 2 hours tonight, I think probably arise because you didn't do a planned development, and then therefore you'd be able to move that building back. You'd be able to save one of those trees. You'd be able to do a lot of the things that, and meet a lot of the comments that we and the public have been making. I can't revisit that for you. I can't force you into it. All I can say is that, boy, it would have been different. What I'm looking at here are two big, massive curb cuts, driveways in the center of a block going into parking lots. And that really, ideally, these things should have been designed together so that they'd work better together. I don't know what they would be, off the top of my head. I'm just seeing the deficiencies here. I don't know, and I'm not going to put staff on the spot as to whether they would have authorized a 16 or 17 foot pass through, in which case you'd only be losing 2 spaces. And potential variances on the back setbacks, those little purple areas on the 100 Ridgely side.
Mr. Walden, it's David Williams. Maybe I could make one comment here. It doesn't seem quite fair. What you just suggested is almost like this is our fault. There is zoning, there's laws, there's a business process. And, it's easy to sort of look back and throw rocks. We didn't zone these properties. The city did.
Yeah, no, and I understand it's too bad because, you're looking at a master plan where all of this could be, done in a very flexible manner. And you're just ahead of the game. And I understand your impatience. I don't blame you for that. All I'm saying is I'm looking at this, you've heard the resistance around these trees. I mean, this is pretty serious comment from the public.
Yeah, and I'd like to just offer, I agree with that. Who wouldn't, if you go to the public and say, do you want to keep these trees? You couldn't find one person to provide comment to say, cut the trees down, right? But with the context of zoning, with the context of regulation, with the context of economic viability, with the context of the desires of a comprehensive plan and a more urbanized, West Annapolis, you can't look at it in that narrow nature. It's not like all of West Annapolis it's not like all of Annapolis Street is lined with these beautiful trees and we're going to cut down the only 2, within the street. I live in West Annapolis.
I know, Mr. Williams, I've heard.
Let me make just my final
facts.
Excuse me?
I want to keep the discussion on the facts here.
What wasn't factual there?
I know you live in West Annapolis.
My point is, my guess is, and the city would know the answer to this, that at least 2 houses in West Annapolis have been destroyed by these big old trees. Many of these trees are dying. They're very dangerous. So there's always 2 sides to the coin. I would prefer not to cut these trees down. So it's not like I'm not like anybody on this team's advocating to lose these trees. These are beautiful, wonderful trees. But it's unfair to sort of come back to us and then say, this, you could have done it as a planned development. There's no encouragement to do that.
I'm not saying you should have done it as a planned development. I want to move on. I'm going to try to work within the confines of what we're offered here and what the code is and what's possible. And what seems to me is that you've got one of these trees. The trees are not dead and dying, and they're not going to be falling on houses anytime soon unless they're not handled carefully, of course. So is there a possibility of saving at least one of these trees, the one that is not close to the building itself or not set in far from the street? And so that's the kind of thing that we really need to look at tonight.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump in here. Excuse me. Why don't we continue the presentation? We knew this was going to be a topic, and we spent some time as a team looking at the site and trying to figure out what we could potentially do differently. I'm going to let our experts talk about that, and I think that it will hopefully be fruitful to the conversation, and hopefully, move this along and continue the dialogue.
Okay.
No,
And
I appreciate that. Mr. Rumpke, I appreciate that. Please do. I'll shut up.
And thank you for all that comment. But just to get back on for a quick 10 seconds here, we're at about 9:32. We don't want to take this much after 10, so let's clearly plan to make it efficient for the next 30 minutes, and we may have to go into a follow-on meeting. Who knows? But I believe Mr. Rumpke had stated there was a couple of issues from the last meeting he wanted to hammer through first. They showed the pictures. I'm not sure if you just went over that or you still wanted to go through that before we go into the tree issue.
Mr. Chairman, I think just let him continue. We know while you were gone, he made clear where he's going to go tonight.
All right.
And just EJ, if I'm at one point of interest here, there was a couple mentioned, I heard the word variance several times. If we had applied for a variance with our initial application, maybe we'd stand a chance. But the standard for a variance is that it has to be the minimum relief necessary, and we wouldn't meet that standard, and it couldn't be any self-created hardship. And this would be, just maximizing some potential that's it's not in line with the variance standard. So I think we'd be very hard pressed. And that's why we came to you all initially with a project that didn't require any variances, met the setbacks and all these standards for the bulk regs in the code. So just wanted to put that out there.
Mr. Hyde, in order to comply with the tree code, though, in order to maintain the character, the beauty and symmetry of the street and of the property, that's not a hardship that you created. So it may be that simply by trying to comply with the tree code, you might qualify for the variance. But let's move on. Let's see what you guys have come up with.
Great, thank you. Leo, I'm going to hand it off to you to kind of take the lead from here, please.
Great, thank you. So we had intended to talk a bit about the trees preemptively, but sounds like we've covered a lot of ground on the trees. I just wanted to add a few things here about that before I get into the rest. I can't move the power lines. I can't do that. And when I look at these projects as I develop them, and I'm going to skip past all the tree stuff here, the design process is a balance, and it takes into account many things. And we have, of course, the desire to save trees where it's possible to do so. But we also have to look at, these two trees that are over 80 years old against the greater good of what we're trying to accomplish here. And the comprehensive plan calls for, redevelopment as an opportunity area in West Annapolis. And we've been given a set of guidelines that tell us what you expect to see as the Planning Commission, as planning and zoning for these areas. And so we look closely at all of the pieces that go into that when we come up with these designs. And so my job as a designer is to try and find a balance on each of these projects to come to a successful conclusion that creates what I'll call a vast improvement over what we have today. And so, yes, the trees need to come down. The trees need to come down with the proposal we have in front of you tonight. That's only after months and months of time of planning and zoning. We've all been out to the site multiple times. We've looked at opportunities on developing the two sites together. And we come to you with what we believe is a plan that provides multiple improvements for not only this corner, but the community at large. And so I need to balance setback requirements, which I can't control, parking requirements, which again, I can't control. They're very difficult to manipulate. There's stormwater management requirements, there's green space requirements, there's bulk requirements. And so as a designer, I take all of these things into account. And then I follow that up with the community meetings we do prior to coming to you with an application. Listen to the opportunities that may be available to us through the community association presentations we've done, through the dialogue we've had with planning and zoning, and through the conversations we've had even since the last meeting to come to you with what we think is the best plan possible. This is not a big building, but the requirements that surround it are big. And if West Annapolis had a public parking garage like downtown does, things would be different. We'd have public parking where people could go to a central place and enjoy the businesses and the opportunities in West Annapolis without having to see parking lot after parking lot. But that's not what we have. We have a requirement to provide these things. And one thing I hear over and over again in West Annapolis is we need parking, we need parking, we need parking. And so I'm reluctant to tell my applicant or my client that, we should cut back on the parking space when there's no other opportunity for it besides on the street. And it's another problem for the community at large. So as much as I appreciate the comment that we could slide this building back and reduce the parking, it's kind of, it depends on what side of the table people want to argue from. I could argue about the trees, I could argue about the parking, there's many things, but in the end, the greater good needs to be served. And so, yes, we're going to take down those trees. But our initial scheme, which I have in front of us here, this is one we talked about last week. And so we said, well, this is what we're going to provide. Now, the requirement is 7 new trees on this property, maybe 8, depending on how you look at it. And so we came to you with this. We heard what everyone said at the last meeting. And so what we did was we went back and said, well, I wonder what would happen if we move things around. So we added trees on the street face here, right? These trees were selected so that they would survive long-term with the parameters that are provided to us through the physical environment. As I said, I can't move the power lines. If someone wants to move the power lines, I'd love it. But you can put another tree in there, a bigger tree that's going to go up into the power lines, and BG&E is going to come back and do just what they do every time, which is aggressively prune the trees, and we're going to have a problem again. So what we're offering is, okay, let's look at what's really happening over here. I can go back and I can add another tree on the street face, and we can talk about what this species is, but right now we have trees that we think are appropriate for the space available. The building setback was determined through the code by looking at what the other setbacks on the street are, and that's where it's set. So, but let's go on. What we heard was we'd sure like to see more trees. We'd sure like to see more oak trees. So we've already had offline conversations with our landscape architect, who you'll hear from in just a minute. We said, look, we're going to put more trees along Giddings here, and these could all be oak trees if you'd like. So look what the opportunity is here. I've got more space available to me, particularly over here. I've got, the ability to do so without the encumbrance of the overhead power lines. And beyond that, I can provide additional green space in other areas around the improvements on site to come up with a total of 22 new trees on this site. Now, if we talk about tree canopy for a minute, I can concede that the trees that are there now provide canopy that we all enjoy. But once this project is mature, this will provide far more long-term canopy opportunity than what you have today. So as we hear about people saying we're losing canopy, well, I have 2 trees that are in the later portions of their life versus 22 trees that are young and vital and will be planted in such a way with the soil amendments necessary to make them very successful. So it's hard for me to kind of, I'm just going to go back to another slide here, and this is a little out of order, but you'll have to bear with me for a second. This is the site. Can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
So look what we have here. We have a mass of parking lot back here with no improvements back here, no stormwater management, no green to kind of break up this area at all. And these trees are crowded against these buildings in the areas where we're talking about. So,
how many trees do you have total for 2 properties?
22
No, in existing today.
I think there's about 4 that are of any size.
What I count.
There are 4.
So when we go back and we look at something like this, yeah, I mean, it's a diagram, right? But what this is showing you is almost instantly you'll have more canopy than you're going to have with what you have there now. And does it change the character of the street? Well, one might argue that it actually improves it, because we all of a sudden have trees that are arranged in a way that will be aesthetically pleasing, they'll be healthy, and we've got a buffer between the sidewalk and the building that's developed in a way that I think is quite successful. So I don't want to spend the entire time talking about the trees, but I think we need to look at these things from a broader perspective. Yes, it's 2 trees, but if we go all the way back to the comp plan, to the West Annapolis plan, and we look at what we're trying to accomplish as a community for West Annapolis, and I weigh the loss of 2 trees that are, we have sentimental value and all the other goodies that go along with it, which I respect, but I would offer that if you step back far enough and look at what we've provided here, there will be an enhancement that's marked here. That's marked.
Hey, Leo, I'm going to add one thing in, and maybe you can point to where we have the Silva cells on Annapolis Street. So
right.
One of the things that we heard from you, Diane, and Bob was the Silva cells. So we went back and looked at that, and we agree with you that this is a great opportunity for us to implement that into our programming. So we're committed to putting those in the project to make sure that the trees that we do plant along Annapolis Street are able to reach their full potential.
Yeah, and absolutely thrive. And so we have those positioned all along Annapolis Street so that the root systems for these trees, once they go in, will be able to maintain their health through, the long term. So
can you quickly describe the Silva cell for the public in 20 seconds or less?
I'll let Kevin do that.
Yeah, so the Silva cell is it's sort of a framework, a space frame product that's about 2 feet by 6 feet. They come in different sizes and they come in different depths, but basically it's a framework that allows you that you build it and you put it together, but it allows you to fill it with soil that's uncompacted. So essentially it creates a structure that has compressive strength to allow for sidewalks and paving above it. But within this space frame structure, it has uncompacted soil. The tree roots would then grow freely from their tree pits through the soil, and then essentially we're creating one connected volume, and essentially we're going too deep. So it would be it's not just one it's not just one level of Silva cells. It'd be too deep, so it'd be quite a bit of soil volume.
Could I just ask for an explanation of this diagram?
Sure.
What is different on this diagram than what you had proposed 2 weeks ago?
So you can see we've added the tree up here. So I'll toggle back and forth, right?
Yes.
So we've added a tree at the upper corner on the right of the screen. And then as I toggle back and forth, you can see on Giddings Avenue, I've shown 2 trees right along the street face there, and we've turned it up to 6. And again, these were not drawn prior to tonight's discussion, or these were drawn prior to tonight's discussion. So we had picked different species, but offline, I've talked with Kevin, and we believe we could do these as oak trees if that's what the community would prefer to see. And we'd have to space them a little differently and do a little work to make that go. But in the interest of trying to respond positively to what we're hearing, that's a change we could make. So I would argue that if I can increase the number by 3 to 1 of the oak trees that are on the property, I'm hard pressed to believe that the loss of 2 and the gain of 6 with proper spacing and proper care is taking away from the community. I think it's an enhancement.
This design adds 1 tree from the previous design.
How do you come to that?
Yes, that's correct. We added 1 tree on the top right.
No, you also added a big tree on Giddings.
We did. Kevin, do you want to talk about the trees on the left side?
Yeah. So Mr. Waldman we had a conversation about the maples on the left side, and we in the next project on Ridgely, we will probably add those trees in there as part of the other project. But instead of losing those 3 trees, we thought we would add them to other areas of this site. And then we're going to plant them in the next project. So you'll get those 3 trees plus 3 more on this site. So that's how that developed. And we listened, and I know that there was a request to plant more trees on Giddings. And we have the telephone pole that we have to honor the setback to, and the setback to the intersection. But we thought that we could get more trees on Giddings. And, as part of this, as this night evolved, we think that we can also just make them all oaks, or we could alternate oaks and smaller tree. We do have to change some spacing and kind of rethink a few things, but essentially you'll get 1 extra tree on this project, and you'll have at least 6 or 7 oaks in the end, which is 3 to 1 to what was to the 2 that are being removed.
You had trees lining the back part of the property. Why would you not keep those there when you've moved everything else? That would be even an added bonus.
Well,
Instead of just-
they'll be there, but they're just on the adjacent parcel. So in the
Yeah.
interest of being, very clear about what this project includes, those trees are part of the project we'll look at next time we're together. So they'll show up there, but we just didn't want to leave them on here and mislead anyone
Got it.
accidentally about the trees on the adjacent property. But they are intended to be there. We just didn't show them in our revised diagram because, again, we just wanted to be talking about this project and making sure everyone was clear about what the numbers are on this project.
Hey, Leo, in the interest of time, do you want to talk about the next two items and then that will sort of wrap up our portion?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Thank you.
So what we heard about the design on the building is that, it might be nice if these upper balconies had outdoor space for the residents to enjoy the street and be able to open up those windows and to provide a little more activity on the street face. So you can see here, we studied it and we're going to put doors in all the apartments here, little balconies that come out. These are going to be quite nice. And I think, that was in response to some commentary we heard. I also pulled this face of the building out further forward so that the gable forms match the gable forms on the end and came into a more harmonized kind of design. Now, keep in mind, at site design plan review, I'm really just trying to give you a sense of what we're trying to accomplish here. This will be developed a bit further as we go through the design process. The other element, and this is in response to Commissioner Pline's comment, we moved the bike racks up to the very front of the building. There's plenty of room to do it. We had shown them in the back, and I think, this will be successful. We've got the benches out front. So, the streetscape will be, I think, really quite nice and inviting. So there was some commentary we heard about the back of the building and not quite having a clear understanding of what that might look like. So we went ahead and tried to clarify that by providing some precedent images. And this is what we looked at when we started to think about what we could do back there. So the trellises along the side of the building are intended to look something like this. And the ones along the back have kind of more of a framework that'll allow plant material to grow vertically along the sides. And so this is just kind of an example of how that might work. It creates a nice outdoor environment, and it kind of starts to provide more green for the area, and you can see how successful they can be. These are some more examples of how we can use those outdoor frameworks that we have to provide green space. And again, I think there was a little bit, it was hard to see in the renderings because they're not developed to that level, but this is the intent. This is what we're trying to accomplish on that back face. So just wanted to provide you with that. And then there were some questions about material selections, that type of thing. And so we just wanted to demonstrate the palette because, again, it's hard to do that in the rendering when you're not that far along with it. But we've got brick that's kind of like a historic type brick. It's not a hard edge brick. These are handmade tumbled bricks here in a color that's consistent with what we see throughout Annapolis. We've got soft materials for the siding, and then we've got pieces for the trellis that are all working in these light gray tones. So there was some concern about whether the building would be too dark. And then we're still in process on trying to determine what is going to be exactly right for us there. So we looked at a lighter palette and a slightly darker palette. But the material is soft and rich. It's a natural product that's intended to provide, kind of a character to the building that's comfortable. So I think I'll stop there and just go back to the imagery here. And if you want to go back to the landscape plan, we can do that too. But again, I just wanted to close with, that's what happens when you go through the design process. You're listening, you're adjusting, you're making changes from what you hear. This has been going on for a long time. It's unfortunate that some people felt they didn't have an opportunity to contribute to the process, but at the same time, I don't know anyone who has worked harder to make sure the community is engaged than EJ and his team. So, and we supported them whenever there was a meeting to be had or questions to be answered. We were there for that. So it's a little hard to hear that people didn't know. The postings were done as they're supposed to be, and it's been in the public eye for a long, long time. So there we go. Am I on mute?
else from the applicant?
I have some questions of Mr. Campion. Is Mr. Campion present?
Yep.
Hi, thanks. Leo, put up something other than this. Yeah. Just a couple of thoughts off the top of my head. You have added, thankfully so, it looks to me like two fairly large trees on either side of the drive aisle or the curb cut. Did I get that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we moved the bike rack, so we're able to put a tree there.
Oh, good. It's right close to a bio stormwater management of some sort, correct?
That's correct.
Have you had any thoughts about integrating, whatever kind of tree and whatever kind of stormwater management, if they would work together?
Yeah, and we could choose a species like river birch that works really well in the rain garden, and that's what we did right next to that in the bioretention area. I think like an oak, like a swamp white oak, or there are species that will grow really well in this area. I think it's not a problem.
Good. I just the thought off the top of my head, I'm not an expert, I'm probably more dangerous because I have just a small amount of knowledge. But in any case, moving ahead, what are your plans about this living wall? What's it going to be rooted in? And is that applicable to Silva Cell also? And can we get some stormwater management effects out of any of this?
So the living wall will be rooted. We'll have enough soil to work with below it, and probably each living wall would contain a half dozen vines, maybe of different species, so that it's got complexity. It's more like a tapestry. And with the soil beneath it, I think it has enough vigor and tilth to grow well and thrive.
Well, okay. I don't know that now is the time. And you and Mr. Smith and Mr. Scott, but I think we need to be real careful. Okay, just caution. So what I'm saying on the left-hand side of the parking lot is there will be on the adjoining property three. So what are the two at the top and the bottom now? What are your choices now at the top and bottom?
So the top, we're still in the oak family. It's a white oak on the top and a pin oak on the bottom. We also have willow oak and southern red oak and swamp white. We have many oaks to work with that would all be good choices.
Okay, one of my suggestions is that if and when we see this property next door, is that somehow you show us how the two properties will interrelate at that border. Okay. Did you do any thinking about the boundary wall and the flow of water and naturally hydrating any of the row of whatever is along that boundary?
I don't know. Do we have some? We may have a picture or two. We've done many projects with walls, with planting below the walls, and that wall will have drainage. It will be built correctly and structurally engineered so that water flows through it and doesn't create hydrostatic pressure. That water will help to water those trees, but it wouldn't be the primary means to water the trees, but it will certainly augment.
If there's water flowing through there, is that good or bad for hollies?
It's okay. It's good.
Okay. They don't mind a wet foot?
Yeah, the American holly is a native tree that grows in the understory in eastern forests, so it's suitable.
Okay. All right. I mean, we're sidestepping the major issue, which is, of course, these major trees that are the two of them that are on this property. I think I have to save my comments on that for later. Thank you. Thank you.
I do have, Tyler Balderson is on the call if you have any questions for him about.
Well, okay. If he could stay on, that would be appreciated. Maybe it's hard for me to come up with them right now.
Kevin, actually, I have a question. Did you get the leaf sample back for the leaf scorch that the leaves are being tested for?
I can pass it on to Tyler. He could respond. I think we don't have it yet, but he can give you some feedback.
Hey there, am I on?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Tyler Boulderson with Bartlett. Thank you guys for letting me join in, and your interest in the trees is a passion just like mine. Spent 20 years working with city developers, residents of Annapolis, saving trees. That's my specialty. It's my passion. And in this particular project, we know we have 2 older specimen
No,
trees.
actually, I'm so sorry I asked. I just need to know because I have a couple more questions and we're running out of time.
Oh,
And
sure,
I don't
sure.
mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but did you get the tree score? Okay, thank
No,
you.
we did not get the sample back. I apologize. No.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yep.
I also have a question for Kevin. Kevin, you were just talking about the American hollies, and when you were talking about there being 22 trees on the site, and you know how much canopy that was going to add. Actually, that was Leo saying that. Are you, or is he, or is anyone saying that those 22 American hollies, which you just said were understory trees, are going to be adding anywhere near the canopy of the larger trees that we're talking about the potential of removing?
Those trees, in urban projects, like I said last time, the trees kind of grow to the limits that they can, given the unique circumstances, and every circumstance is different. So in this case, I think these 3 oak trees are going to grow large and strong, and they're going to have plenty of soil to grow in for the next 50 years. They're not going to be encumbered by driveways and other surfaces. And I think they're going to grow over this parking lot, which is a dark surface. So that's important to alleviate the heat island effect. So cooling the temperatures. So I think the most important trees, to answer your question, are the oak trees that we can plant around the parking. The holly trees will certainly help, and they'll add some wildlife value, but like you have to look at the site as a whole.
Right. I agree. I just wanted to find out about, because I know those are small and they're great for screening, and I love American hollies, but it just doesn't do what these other trees are going to do. And I just want to jump back to something Leo said, because I know we're running out of time, and I didn't even get to stormwater, and poor Matt is probably on the phone waiting. But with respect to something Leo said, he said it so convincingly, or so authoritatively, we can't move the power lines. And he's said that before, but one of the things I'd like to point out is he did a wonderful job of removing the power lines on a project where his office is located right near where I live on Chesapeake and 4th. So when people say they can't do it, it won't happen, or it can't happen, I just want to revisit that, because in our last conversation, we never actually got the numbers, as I recall. And then I wondered, did the developer give us some numbers about what that would look like? Or did the city do it? And I just want to make sure that we've really, exhausted that, because like I said, if there's ever a chance to do something like that, which would allow the trees and the symmetry of the trees to stay or be replanted on Annapolis Street, which is such a wonderful boulevard-like entrance to that part of town, it might be worth doing. And then I want to follow up with a question to, I don't think Eric Lushinsky's on the phone, but Tom is. When you're doing, well, let me ask Leo first about the power lines. You said it can't be done. And where did the numbers come from, and have they been presented to us or to planning and zoning?
Well, anything can be done, but the power lines belong to BG&E, and BG&E works with the city. So if you remember when they took the power lines down on Main Street, they decided, the city decided that they wanted all of that run through a center conduit down the road. So,
but do we have any costs associated with that, Leo?
Yeah, Diane, I'll jump in here. We do not have a cost number from BG&E. The way their process works is they don't put jobs in their system until there's an approved plan and they know what they're going to do. So they won't actually quote anything until something's further along.
So are you saying, EJ, that there's no way?
Let me just finish here, Diane. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was told it would be over $100,000 roughly for us to do that. Potentially more, depending on what they would have to do. It's not economically feasible for us to do that on this project. So that's not something that we're going to pursue at this time.
Wouldn't
I
it
just
potentially
wanted to-
save you some money and save the trees, which would make a lot of people happy? Not
They-
just happy, there's a lot of ecosystem services for the street and for the whole community, but has anyone done that kind of analysis of what it would cost to move the power lines and be able to maintain the trees or trees
Again, I'll
of that
just-
canopy size?
reiterate what I said, where it's not something we're going to pursue. It's not economically feasible for us to do that on the project.
And I just wanted to correct one comment that I heard was that, we had taken power lines down here at our project in Eastport. That's not the case. The power lines are across the street and we did install street trees. So I think there's an improvement on what people see, but the power lines were not ever moved on my project.
Ah, well, that was my mistake. I thought they were, and I was giving you credit for being, a leader doing what we all say we want to do. So my apologies for.
There are no power lines on either side of my project. They're all across the street.
Got it. Now, is Tom Smith still on the phone?
Still here.
Okay.
Commissioner Butler.
So Tom, I was wondering, I haven't been involved with the West Annapolis master plan, but do you know during that process whether there's any talk about burying the utilities over there?
That's a really good question. And I haven't been as intimately involved as Eric or Sally in that process. I frankly would have to defer to them. Those are
This is
typically.
Sally. I
Hi,
don't
Sally. Thank
think
you.
it has come up in West Annapolis. It has come up for downtown. And so we were going to be including it as a recommendation. I don't think we've gotten far enough to discuss the limits of it. I mean, I think citywide it would be a nice recommendation. Yeah.
I was just curious because I thought maybe if it's already been discussed in West Annapolis and you're already going in that way, we could maybe start talking about, starting with this project, making it, trying to get incentivized, shall we say, the developer to do that. If that's the way we're going there, and they have such a big presence in West Annapolis anyway. So
Diane, I participated in all of those discussions so far, and the process is not that far along.
Okay.
It's still at a very conceptual stage.
Yes, got it. All right, and I still haven't seen the total tree inventory, and maybe Kevin, you can send that because I know I think Leo was saying there's 7 new trees, maybe 8. Well, the 2 trees with DBHs of 37 and 39. That leads to 6 trees just for those 2, and as we talked about before, under 1709-070, they have to be of the same species and density of the trees that are being taken down. So I don't know the other trees that were on site, because we don't have that report. It's kind of odd when we review things. We usually get a tree inventory and it spells out, here are the 2 trees with DBH this. We're going to review it 3-to-1 because it's not in the critical area. And we're just missing that information. So for me, something that would be super helpful from you guys is to have that tree inventory to see what you really need to.
I don't think there are any trees there other than
there
those.
are at least 4. I think EJ Rumke said that, or David, somebody
Really
said
small-
that.
Yeah, there's a very small dogwood and there's a very small hophorn beam.
Okay, got it. So they do actually have to be replaced, right? They're not just, you're doing this gratuitously.
No, they're mitigated for in the plan.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so but can we just see that plan that just shows what the trees are, what the health of them are, and the species and what your ratio? I maybe I missed it. Was it in the binder that you provided? If so, I really apologize.
Kevin, was there a tree inventory included in the original application? I just don't recall.
I don't believe there was, but we can certainly provide it.
That would be super helpful. Thank you.
Well, okay. I have a question for Mr. Smith. Tom?
Yes, Commissioner Wallman.
Thank you. I hope not to put you on the spot, but I probably am.
Nothing new.
You get paid a lot to be put on the spot, right? this business about drive alleys, you know, say between these two parking lots. Have you ever, is there a way to get below 22 feet?
The narrowest the fire department will accept is 20 feet.
Okay.
That's their fire trucks and their outriggers, but you also then have to look at turning radiuses for fire trucks and other things. And correct, it's very tight.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. I have nothing further.
Mr. Wilson, I've got something, and we are going to go past 10, obviously. Your viewpoint on moving the building back and keeping the 2 oak trees in the front, and possibility if you were relieved of having, let's say, those 4 parking spots in the rear that are up against the building. Any comments? Because that was brought up by Alderman Savage before. Is moving
Sure.
back. So I'd like to address that option that people brought up as their suggestion.
Sure. You know,
Or did you already do it and I missed it?
no, we didn't talk about that, but I'm happy to talk about it a little bit. You know, as we mentioned, you know, the trees are great, but I think that would be a short-sighted solution to what I'm looking to provide a long-term solution to. So we could do some gymnastics and try and take up the parking spaces, and then we still have the parking problem. And we have 2 trees that are, you know, well past their midlife here, and they will suffer as a result of any work that happens on this site, which is, you know, certainly, you know, something that needs to happen, you know, as part of the redevelopment plan for West Annapolis. So could you make the case, oh, slide the building back and then we'll save the trees? Well, there's a bigger picture here. This is about the comp plan. This is about the character of the streets and how the buildings relate to it, not just the trees. So you're trying to create an environment in West Annapolis that's pretty focused. And so those things, to me, I would argue, require you to look at all of these things together. And so even if you could move the building back, I would still say, look, let's not work around trees that, you know, are going to have challenges for the long term. Let's solve the problem in a way that is long term. Let's put the big trees where we can put them. Let's put more big trees. And so, you know, as much as I think there's some attraction to the trees, I think you really have to put that into the balance with everything else that we're talking about tonight. And the things we talk about as a planning commission and as people concerned with the community. I mean, I think the 2 trees, if you look at the greater good, I think this project provides that and more.
The total number of parking spots that you have?
Geez, I'd have to count them. I can't remember.
It's 18 that I see. I just want to make it obvious to the public, there is none under the building, correct?
There's none under the building, no.
Correct. It's one of these obvious things I'm stating to you and me, but maybe the public doesn't know. So 18 parking spaces, none under the building.
Right.
And you have on-street parking. So, I mean, from my perspective, if I was just looking at this from a parking perspective, I would say, man, it's not enough. Everybody's gonna be eating up everything on the street. But I'm not looking at it from just a parking perspective.
Sure. I mean, I think when we go back to the code, as Tom described, you know, there's prescribed calculations you do for the proposed uses, and this meets those.
And we are going with the comprehensive plan to a more walkable environment where we're encouraging not driving. But on to another quick question. The 4 trees that are facing Annapolis Street, you went from 3 to 4.
Yes.
Before, could you explain to the public the type of trees before and now what are they again?
Well, I'll let Kevin do that.
Yeah, they were, they still are cherry trees. They were cherries and they still are cherries. We're still looking.
What option could you have? You mentioned planting oaks there. Is there something that, like, middle of the road between the size of an oak and the size of a cherry tree that could actually go there without growing too much in the power lines, but give you a greater canopy? Is there any kind of mitigation tree?
I think that I would guess that the power lines are probably less than 20 feet from the ground, the lower lines. So
the lower would be cable and telephone.
Right. So there are certainly other options that we could explore, but I would worry about putting in oak trees there. You'll have a similar future.
I would say this, knowing Verizon guys and also having buddies who are electrical transmission engineers, electrical companies aren't going to aren't going to allow trees to be growing within their power lines. However, cable and telephone companies will allow their lines to be through trees a lot more likely, because there's no shock hazard much to say so of that. So it's a little bit different. I know this is kind of a weird stretch, but if you plant a tree that would grow a bigger canopy, I'm not really worried about the 20 foot off the ground cable and telephone. I'm more worried about another 15 feet above that, which would be the electrical line. So I don't know if you could get something bigger in there with a thought of growing, having the cable and telephone go between the tree and the tree grow around it. Because you can actually see that in my neighborhood where that does exist.
Well, let me ask a question, and I just want to direct this to Tyler because he didn't get to talk very much. But Tyler, do you think there's another type of tree that might be equally successful or even more so than the cherries we could look at?
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of limited when you're dealing with native trees. So, native trees are tough to find. I know we want to try and find that, but, I always try and find the right tree for the right site. Hornbeam came up. That's an existing tree that's there that might fit that. That kind of comes to mind as kind of a mid-story type tree that doesn't get very big. And there is already one there existing. So that might be one in mind. I certainly can look into that as well. Trying to stick with native if that's something that the community is really interested in.
Oh, it's very interesting. Thank you, sir.
I think we're not tied to one specific species. I would add that. I think we just want to provide a tree that's a responsible tree for the future. I'd love to say we could plant a tree that'll grow up through the power lines and we'll trim it and we'll make it beautiful, but that's not what BG&E does. So
right. But this middle of the road sounds interesting. And now that you're putting in silva cells, you might have the volume to carry something that's a little bit bigger than cherries. Mixing them up, it just keep an open mind. It sounds like.
Well, I guess I would offer that, if part of the approval includes looking at a larger tree or other opportunities, then I think we could continue that dialogue with planning and zoning staff if that was a directive. And, we have plenty of experts here. My goodness, there's plenty of people at the city that need trees. We got Kevin, I know. Mr. Waldman, you're not an expert on trees.
Don't count me in.
But there are people here who are that can help us make a decision about how to get the biggest trees in there. We're not afraid of putting big trees in. We're just foolish. So if there's a better choice, we're happy to look at it for all of these.
And I would also add that the applicant's not looking to plant the smallest size. I think we're going to plant trees that are appropriate.
Great. All right. It's been a productive discussion this evening.
It's muted. Any other commissioners with questions or comments at the moment?
No.
From the applicant, anything else at the moment?
No.
Don't believe so. Thank you.
Okay, and commissioners, it's 10:15. Going much past 10 o'clock is not advisable because the public tends to drop off. It doesn't become really a public meeting at that point. We're not putting it in a normal time or hour. And I do believe we are much past that. So with that in mind, I'm going to recommend or bring it up for option for the rest of the commissioners that we continue this to our next meeting in 2 weeks to continue the debate and then finalize conclusions on this matter. What do you commissioners think?
So as a point of order, we would close the public hearing and then deliberate on our next meeting.
Right, and we've moved on from all of, correct. And the public hearing, we've moved on from that when we moved into rebuttal by the applicant. So,
Ben, I have a quick question. Could you leave it open till the next meeting if we were going to deliberate at the next meeting? There could be additional, comment that we haven't had. So does it hurt to keep it open?
We've had 2 meetings. We've had a lot of time out there, but a lot of people, of course, always say they weren't aware. If you want to leave it open, that's one vote for leaving the comment open. We could bring those comments to air at the next meeting for the first 20, 30 minutes.
Well, I'm just saying, I don't know. I'm just asking what my fellow commissioners think. If you really want to close it, it's fine with me. Is there any, is there any harm in leaving public testimony open for more people to comment?
I think we had a lot of new information today. I would kind of like to keep it open myself, but
Okay.
And as long as it doesn't cost us any time or energy or work, right? That I could think of.
What about accepting written testimony but not have live testimony?
We really haven't had live testimony except for.
And we had it tonight.
Well, we only had, but we didn't open it for everybody. Nobody knew. We didn't really advise the public, so it was kind of unfair to the regular rest of the public.
On the form, it asks if you would like to give live testimony, and several people said that they would, and they did.
Yeah, but at our last meeting, we distinctly said we weren't going to do it until the December 17th meeting. So the fact that we had some people was an oddity. So considering that, I think it would be wise to, sure, leave the public testimony open until the next meeting on December 17th. We see what we get, bridge those comments in, and we come to some conclusions. Next meeting, why not? I mean, let's get it right. Let's get it right for the public. Comments?
That's fair.
Okay, that's fair.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate if I prepared a proposed list of conditions, even though the public testimony portion is not yet closed?
It's all, you can write whatever you can write whatever you want for any meeting. Anybody could do that. Of course you could. We need to get a jump on things and be ready at the next meeting to move. So absolutely getting some conditions, and anybody else who has a condition, please draft that up. Good suggestion.
Well, wait, we're like, I think because conditions are often not followed or enforced, we have to have a discussion about whether we want to even have conditions anymore. It seems to be, well, let's have this offline just as a point of order for the planning commissioners, because it's been a problem, and I'm just wondering whether we want to.
So you'd like to have a conversation about making conditions on a.
Well, I just feel like talking about conditions without any idea of whether they're enforceable or can be enforced is a little dangerous, as we've seen in the past. But maybe this isn't the right time to talk about it. It's late.
It's not the right time. No, I agree. Okay.
Got it.
We can punt that to a sidebar for procedural talk. Sure.
All right.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Absolutely. To clear you, but I'm for conditions myself. But anyway, we'll punt that conversation. Okay, so right now we're looking at continuing the public comment open until December 17th, seeing what we get. Do we have, and the developers heard some of our concerns, the public's concerns today, so hopefully they go back and talk about a few different types of trees and address some other things that were said. And since it's 10/19, we can come back December 17th and make it happen. So the public hearing will remain open. So members of the public, please submit comment through the webpage. And also you'll be able on December 17th to actually testify live via the Zoom webinar feature. Please note that on your application, because that should be the first wide open one for the Planning Commission. And to make it fair, since we've had some today, we will definitely accommodate that in the next one. I think that makes sense. On the agenda for the next meeting was also the adjoining property. So that might be an issue for the applicant. And I want to ask the applicant if they want a concern of moving that one, or you still want to present that one starting on December 17th. And I would recommend doing that. Applicant, you have a concern with that?
We would like to keep the 17th.
Okay, okay, great. And the Bartlett arborist, who's still online tonight, we never got to him to get his personal comments, but Diane was talking to him. I think it's Tyler. Is he going to be here at the next meeting, or should we hit him up for a quick 2 or 3 minutes to give him a fair shake? I think it would be worth it to get his fair shake if he's here right now. We've got 2 or 3 minutes for that.
I think we all read his.
And I can't be made available.
You
I'm
can't
sorry,
commit.
say that again, Tyler?
Yeah, I can. I can be available. I would love to give my my opinion on the project, and with my experience, I think it could be beneficial.
How long would it take you to give that opinion?
If you want it now, great. If next meeting is fine as well.
How long would it take you to give that opinion? Right now.
Better at the next meeting, because look.
Yeah, we'd like to reserve that for the next meeting. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do it at the next meeting. All right, wonderful. So we're going to keep the public testimony open, and if you could stop presenting that slide, and I'll go ahead and put the agenda back up. Thank you. Okay, so public hearing for SDP 2020-001 will remain open for public comment till the December 17th meeting. And we will move on from that down to miscellany. Commissioners, any miscellaneous items that we need to bring up at the moment? Other than the sidebar we will have for procedural concerns in the meantime. Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move on to adjournment. Do I have I'd like to move that we adjourn the meeting. Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for your input, especially the public. It's really, really helpful.